If you like the video, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment for more videos like this.
For anyone who's encountered supernatural or paranormal things like otherworldly and strange creatures, shadow entities, or other scary beings, what was your scariest sighting?
I stayed in a log cabin in the woods on vacation in the mountains to get away from society. I stayed there for about a week. It's extremely secluded and takes about 4 hours to get there from the nearest city. A winter storm blew in that night, and the whole night I was cutting wood in the garage part of the house. I'd hear weird cackling outside the cabin and loud bangs, as if someone were banging trees with sticks, but when it was blowing with snow, it was hard to determine what was what. When I was lying in my bed, I brought my dog. He was growling towards the window almost all night. I would bang on the house, and it really sounded like something was out there. I dismissed it because there was no way anyone could be around. The nearest house was miles down the mountain. I didn't sleep well through the night, but when I woke up, I got dressed and grabbed a shovel to dig myself out. My heart stopped when I saw footsteps all around my house, as if someone were running around in the blizzard without shoes on. Part of me thought, oh my God, someone needed my help, and I didn't get them inside, but then again, why didn't they just knock at the door? I followed the footsteps down the mountain into the woods, where they seemingly vanished in the blowing snow. It was oddly quiet that day walking out there. You could hear the trees and limbs creak from the wind. Needless to say, I packed up and left that day. No idea what it was. Not me, my ex-girlfriend. Her aunt asked her to take care of her old house while she was moving to the new one. She stayed 2 nights, but on the third one she asked me to go with her because paranormal things were happening. I went with her because I was attracted to her. Anyway, the house was almost empty, only her aunt's bed, where she slept, the TV, and some boxes with stuff were left. Finally, I closed the room door, opened the window, and we cuddled. She slept deeply. About 2 to 3 a.m., she shouted really hard. She told me that someone was talking in her ear, saying that I was going to be ended because it didn't like me. She woke up and saw a little person over her. It was like half a meter, with just pants, pointy nose and pointy ears, with green-colored skin. Its eyes were like those of a baby, big and round but dark. When I woke to turn the lights on, I found out the door was opened. She had bites and scratches on her toes and feet. The next hours, I turned all the lights on. She slept 3 hours later. I stayed awake. I didn't see and hear anything, but that shit scared me enough to stay alert. Finally, her aunt arrived with her cousins and some neighbors. The move took 2 days more, but nobody stayed in that house. Banshee. My gran was from Ireland. She told me and my cousins scary bedtime stories about the Banshee. She once told us that when she was 13 she was running an errand for her mom with her sister Mary. They had to go through a wooded area to get to the next small town, which was their destination. There was a small stream where the kids used to fish and play. They were approaching the stream, and from a little distance, Mary said to Gran, "What's that, Annie?" They both stopped and looked. Beside the stream with her back to them was the figure of a woman with long, dark hair. She wore a light-colored dress, and her feet were bare. They were silent so they could hear soft, gentle weeping. Without waiting another minute, my gran said she and Mary turned and ran the other way as fast as they could. When they got home, they told their dad about their adventure. Their mom wasn't too happy that they returned without completing the errand. Their dad said it was probably the Banshee. Their mom just rolled her eyes and mumbled something under her breath. The next day, a younger child known to the family was found face down in the stream at the same location where they had seen the woman. It is said that the Banshee shows up just before a tragedy or death. What is it? This just happened to me about 2 hours ago, driving home from my friend's place in Clarkstorp. It's winter right now, and because of all my motorcycle accidents, my joints hurt. The trip is about 200 kilometers. About 70 kilometers from my home in Johannesburg. I pull over to stretch my legs and walk around. Now I'm very aware of my surroundings, as there have been a lot of farm attacks in South Africa, and I'm in the middle of a farm country. I'm admiring the sky as the Milky Way is out in all its glory. It's breathtaking. As I'm sitting there on the side of the road, I become aware that I've been watched. It's an unsettling feeling, almost as if I'm being hunted. Normally I'll be armed, but for some reason I left my gun and it's safe at home, some 70 kilometers away from me. I know, you might be thinking, man, you're in Africa, it's dangerous as it is. I slowly get back into the general safety of my car and try to switch it on. It doesn't start. I think so, really. I've just driven almost 200 kilometers, all is fine now. This is just what I need. I switch off all my lights so I can see and take a quick look around. Nothing. I pop my hood and get out. With my phone's light, I'm looking all over, the plugs are good, the battery is good, and the fuses are good. Suddenly my phone dies. Just switches off. And that feeling returns. I look around again, and I can't see anything. But I can hear it. Walking just in the fields, no more than 5 meters away from me on my left. It's pacing up and down. I listen closely, it sounds like a dog but bigger. Normally farmers keep dogs in the fields to protect the cattle and sheep, but this is corn and sunflowers. This can't be a dog, this is bigger, and this is angry. I'm in its territory. I jump back into my car and try to switch it on again. It turns. I thank God and jump out again to close my hood. It's still to the left of me. This time it's right by the fence, looking right at me. The light from the stars and moon, I can make it out to be at least 6 feet 10 in, with yellow eyes and white teeth snarling at me. The creature is no dog. I jump back in my car and book it out of there. I look in my mirror, and I can't see anything. To my horror, something catches my eye as it runs across the road. I have never seen anything like it. Big, black paws looking to be twice the size of my hand with what look like razor-sharp claws. I serve and just miss it. Last time I saw it, it was standing on its 2 hind legs. Next time I will travel that road. I'll do it throughout the day. But what I really want to know is what the heck I have just seen. About a decade ago, my family and I went to a wedding up in the mountains near Glenwood Springs, Colorado. My 3 kids and I reserved a room in a nearby historic hotel. When we arrived, we found our room down a long hallway on the 2nd floor. I have never been one to believe in the paranormal, but I had the strangest feeling walking down that hallway. It was almost as if I kept seeing something following us in the periphery of my vision. The next day I half-jokingly asked the desk clerk if the hotel was haunted. She said yes, there were sightings of a 7-year-old child who had fallen to their death from a 2nd-floor balcony. I got chills. 2 of my children were 7 years old at the time. The first time I saw it. I have had quite a few paranormal encounters. They don't happen often anymore, but when I was younger, it was a common occurrence. And it wasn't just me seeing these things, it was my whole family. The first time I really encountered it, I was 12 and home alone. My mother was out of state, watching my older brother play for his college lacrosse team, my oldest brother was deployed, and my dad had taken my sister to soccer practice. He would only be gone for a little over an hour, so it wasn't that big of a deal. I was a good kid, never answered the door, always kept the doors locked, and didn't do things I wasn't supposed to. I was in the kitchen, playing on the family computer. From upstairs, I could hear footsteps walking from my room, across the banister, to my parents' room. Again, I was 12, so, naturally, I put my phone down and asked who was there. The only response I got was my parents' room door slamming shut. My 2 dogs and cat came flying down the stairs and into the kitchen. Rex, our oldest dog, R.I.P., stood in front of me, growling into the hallway. Rambo, our other dog, also R.I.P., was whining by the back door, shaking with Gumby, my cat, standing beside him. Gumby's hair was sticking up, and he was hissing. By that point, I'm freaking out, unable to breathe, and unsure of what to do. My parents' room was right above the kitchen, so I could hear this thing walk around above me. Honestly, it sounded like someone was throwing shit across the room, breaking stuff. Kind of like a rage room. I ran out to the back door and hid behind the couch on the deck with my dogs and cat. I called my dad and told him that there was someone in the house and that he needed to come home. Over the phone, I could literally hear him speeding. He was only 2 minutes away, so it didn't take long before he had come barreling into the house through the kitchen door. I came inside, and my dad told me to wait outside while he looked around. My sister and I, who were young and foolish at the time, decided to follow him anyway. We watched from the bottom of the stairs as he checked upstairs. When he came back down, he was confused. Nothing was out of place, and there wasn't anything to suggest a break-in. I ran upstairs and into my parents' room, and she was right, not a single thing was out of place. But, when I turned around, there was something standing at the end of the hallway. Its head was turned painfully to the side as it dragged across the ceiling. It was basically a shadow, and it had these bright, yellow eyes and a black top hat. Its arms reached down to its knees, and it smiled at me. I couldn't see any teeth, and it was all just blacked out, but I swear it smiled. I couldn't move and I honestly couldn't breathe. I was terrified, and I just watched it. I looked away for a second when my sister called my name, and when I looked back, it was gone. I had more encounters with this thing after that. Sometimes, I could see it, other times, I couldn't. And I swear to God it's a true story. It still freaks me out, and it's encounters like this that are the reason I'm so scared of the dark. A huge shadow thing that slid across the road in front of my pickup one night. I had seen it standing on the side of the road against one of those large white billboard maps that show truck drivers where to crash when they lose their brakes coming down a hill. My wife was with me, and I asked her, "What the hell is that thing?" As I slowed down, it started to glide across the sign and into the road. I was at a dead stop when it crossed in front of us, probably no more than 10 to 15 feet away. This is what I was able to make out: it didn't walk or run, it slid or glided so smoothly that at first I thought it had to be on tracks of some kind or some kind of prank. This is hard to explain, and you'd have to see it to appreciate it, but it seemed to somehow absorb the light from my headlights as it passed through them. It had no discernible head, more of a dome that connected to its torso, and I got the impression of very bulky or muscular shoulders, but below that, it was just a column of shadow. When it crossed the road, it slid through the guardrail on the other side like it wasn't there. Whatever this thing was made of, it could still be seen in the dark out of the range of my headlights. I think this had something to do with the light absorbing effect. It made no indication that it knew we were there, or maybe it didn't care, it just glided on by. I have no idea what that thing was, and my wife refuses to talk about it to this day. This happened in the late 90s. My friend and I are trying to identify what he possibly saw. This is not a joke or a fictional story, we are genuinely trying to understand what happened. My friend reported seeing something in a forest near a road and a cemetery at around 3:20 a.m. The road runs directly into the forest. He was together with another friend at the time, and both of them reported seeing the same thing. They described a humanoid figure approximately 170 centimeters tall, entirely white in appearance, the whole body appeared white. The conditions were such that the figure could be seen clearly enough to make out its general shape. The distance was around 4 to 5 meters, and the figure was slowly moving and appeared to be coming closer. According to their description, the figure had no distinguishable facial features. They also mentioned a faint glow or soft light around it, described as a kind of natural aura rather than a direct light source. The figure did not interact directly, and there was no physical contact or sound associated with it. I wasn't there, but I'm trying to help them figure out what it was. There is also some local context. There is a reported case of suicide in the forest, and an old cross is located there. There is also an additional unverified report from a taxi driver who was driving with my friend. During the ride, the driver mentioned seeing something similar in roughly the same area, near the same road leading into the forest. This is not confirmed, but the description was reportedly similar. We are not claiming anything supernatural. We are simply trying to find possible explanations or known phenomena that could match this description. Any serious input would be appreciated. Also, would it be a good idea to investigate the area ourselves? I've never shared this with anyone before, and I know it sounds crazy, but I swear this is totally true. One afternoon, when I was around 10 or 11 years old, I was home alone lying on my bed reading. A hand that looked like it was from a gorilla costume reached up from the side of my bed that was against the wall and grabbed my wrist firmly and tugged my arm toward it. I frantically struggled in a tug of war for a few seconds, it let go, and the hand disappeared back down the side of the bed. I freaked out and immediately looked under the bed, and there was nothing there. Not only that, but the bed frame was so close to the wall, there was a bit of a gap between the mattress and the wall, that no one would have been able to fit their hand/arm from under the bed through the gap between the bed frame and the wall. I can't explain it. Okay, so just to start with, I have never believed in anything supernatural or paranormal, but this was just too weird to explain. Background: so I'm from England, and I'd never heard of skinwalkers before about 2 weeks ago. I'm visiting some family in New Mexico right now, and they live a couple of miles from what I'm told is a reservation. My cousin had to go pick up a friend from said reservation a few days into my visit and invited me along to see more of America. It was getting dark when we set off from his house. Upon our arrival, the family invited us into their home, where I had the opportunity to meet my friend's family. It all started when I whistled for my cousin's dog to come over to me, and this friend's grandmother gave me a really weird look, like I'd shit in her cornflakes or something. My cousin noticed my confusion and said, "Oh, you can't whistle in here, not at night anyway." I found this really strange and asked why, but the expressions on everyone's faces prompted my cousin to say that he would explain it to me later. So anyway, we left, and on the way home, my cousin and his friend told me about skinwalkers and the superstitions, etc. I didn't believe a word and rolled my eyes and knew that it was all just some spooky boogeyman superstition. However, a couple of nights ago, I was driving back from a supermarket with my uncle and saw something I honestly couldn't explain rationally. It was late, but just light enough for me to see. Out of the car window, in some bushes on the side of the road, I saw what can only be described as a ducked-up kind of werewolf. Let me explain. I only saw it for a short time, as it soon disappeared, but it looked to me like a half-rotten wild dog with humanoid features, such as human hair and eyes. Except the eyes were bright and creepy as hell. It was also running as though a human would if they were imitating a dog or a four-legged creature. What makes it creepier, if it's possible, is it ran alongside the car for a few seconds, and then as we turned left at a junction, it stopped in the middle of the right-hand road. I asked my uncle if there were any wild animals back there. I gave the general direction where the right-hand road leads, and he said, "What? On the reservation?" That road was the entrance, basically, to the reservation. After speaking to my cousin, he said, "Maybe it was a skinwalker trying to keep you off of the reservation. If anyone has a logical explanation, I really am all ears. Please, if you don't have an explanation, is it possible that it was a skinwalker? I'm really too freaked out to go outside now. Luckily I'm leaving in a couple of days, but still." Hiking state park encounter. This is not a sighting but an encounter with something. Back in 2010, when I was in a lot better shape than I am now, I hiked the Pinnacle Trail at Table Rock State Park in South Carolina. Which, ironically, I live very close to now. I was the only one on the mountain, as it was early April and it was early in the day. The trail reaches all the way to the top. It took me 2 hours to get to the top. It was beautiful. I rested. Had a snack and water, then headed back down. I was about 30 minutes from the entrance when I noticed that I didn't hear anything. I stopped dead in my tracks. No wind, bugs, birds, running water, nothing. It was like I was in a vacuum or something. Just for your information, there are streams and running water on most of the trails, which can be easily heard and are very loud at times. I actually tapped my ear with my finger to see if I could still hear. I could. I look around like, what the hell? I guess it's like what a bug feels like when you trap it with a glass jar. Then the smell hit me. Having raised many hunting dogs and pets when I was younger, it was like a doghouse bed that hadn't been cleaned in a long while, except it was 10 times more pungent. I almost became sick. There was something there was no doubt in my mind, but it was staying hidden. I looked around everywhere, but nothing but the odor was all around me. I carry a pistol most places I go. I have a concealed carry permit. I didn't even think of drawing it. For some reason, it didn't seem like drawing my weapon would be helpful. I finally booked it. Screw this noise, I thought. About 30 yards up, I see a doe that is just eating grass or something. She looks at me and is not scared in the least. Which I think is very odd. Most deer bolt when they see you. I continued down the trail like a bat out of hell. The sound came back at some point further down the trail. When I made it to the entrance, I came across a young couple entering the park. I must have looked like I had experienced something shocking or disturbing. They looked at me like I had 3 heads. I left and went home. I had forgotten about it until one day I was listening to scary stories that I had discovered on YouTube maybe a year after that while I was painting my house. I stopped immediately when I heard a very similar example being told. It was the vacuum/silence someone said they experienced. It was a park ranger story. Later, I discovered that some people refer to it as the Oz effect or the silence. I also saw an episode of Paranormal Witness that was very similar to mine in 2011 about a police officer hiking and encountering a Bigfoot. Am I making this up? Decide for yourself. It's one of those have to be their things. Personally, I would much rather watch it on TV and be entertained. Real life is much more frightening. I came home from college after being away for around a month. I was feeling quite disheartened due to my declining grades, and I was uncertain about whether I wanted to continue my studies. I feared I would be a failure. However, seeing my cat, who, at that time, was more my parents' cat than mine, brought me immense joy. I spent nearly half an hour petting and playing with him, which was likely a record duration, as he typically allowed no one to pet him for more than 5 minutes. After he helped to calm me down, I went to fill his bowl with food. I noticed that his bowl was no longer in its usual spot, but I thought that was normal, so I began searching the house for it. Eventually, I gave up the search and decided to put some food on the floor, but I could no longer find my cat. I assumed he just ran out through the back door that I left open to air out the place. Later, when my parents came home, we had a chat and dinner. My mother asked me, "Why is there cat food on the floor?" I said I could not find the bowl, and I wanted to give some food to the cat, so I just put it on the floor and assumed he would eat it all. Then my mother asked me, "Oh, you don't know?" I was like, "No what? The cat died. I thought your father told you." I do not remember what they said he died of or when, but I just remember sitting there and thinking to myself that either I am going crazy, more likely option, or there is a cat out there that looks exactly like our cat used to and acts almost exactly the same as our cat did. The extra long petting time was a bit unusual for my cat, but not unheard of, and on top of all of that, that cat somehow got into the house and locked the doors behind itself, only to disappear after letting me, a complete stranger, pet him, or her, for half an hour. The third option is the supernatural one, including the spirit of my dead cat, and personally, I just do not believe in that, but then again, the other two options are A, either I am going crazy, or B, the astronomically low chance event happened. Winged creature. I was about 3 to 4 years old, my mom and my stepfather were living in an apartment, and we didn't have very much money. I was in bed until I was woken up by the sound of something in the window. This thing's skin was white as printer paper to be specific. It had short black hair, it had red eyes and long fangs, it had wings, and it was floating. I knew it was because I was on the second story of the apartment, since it had stairs. The creature said, "Let me in." I was scared as hell, and I couldn't move, I was terrified. I screamed, and my mom came up the stairs when the creature went off. My mom ran upstairs and heard me screaming. She could tell I wasn't faking it. I was frozen, I was very pale. My mom took me downstairs, and we heard noises all around the house. Then the door moved, and the dog was barking, which proved that something was there and that it wasn't just my imagination. The noises lasted for hours, and still to this day I have no idea what happened that night. I wish I could prove this because this actually did happen. My mom suspected it was some people robbing the house, but I disproved this because I heard noises that no human could make. It had a deep voice, I guess when it spoke, it was an automatic clue that the tale was a fake story. To anyone who believes this, I swear to God that it actually happened. I was scared and terrified, I had no idea what to do. I still do not know what happened by any means at all. Strange sighting. Okay, so a little background. I live on a farm, about 5 acres in size. I am walking out into the field during a heavy fog. Didn't think much of it at the time. But as I got so far out, I could see the silhouette of 2 people in the field. I could hear them talking at first but couldn't see them. I approached the person because I was thinking to myself, "What the duck are you doing on my property?" As I approached, they disappeared, only to move farther away. I yelled at them, saying, "Who are you? Why are you here?" They appeared mere feet from me. As I started to run back inside, they flashed and chased after me. They seemed to disappear, only to reappear closer, yet they never reached me, they just kept chasing me. I never go into the field anymore at night. I'm 23 now, this happened around when I was 19. Also note I'm very skeptical of the supernatural, but I do believe now. There's something on my family farm, but I don't know what. This kind of started on Christmas of 2017. My mom, brother, stepsisters, and I were riding back to my grandparents' house, which is my mom's parents' home, when I saw something on a tree line about a mile away that I really don't ever want to see again. The thing was running into the small tree line a mile up. The thing was tall, gray, bipedal, and muscular. I didn't get a look at it from the front. Nothing really big happened until last summer, near the end. I had college in a few weeks, and my brother was getting ready to move to our dad's in Kansas. My brother started to see something around the farm. He said he'd seen it for a while before then. For him, it was a man with deer legs and a deer head. I have autism, and so I don't feel like I'm being watched like my brother and others on the farm felt sometimes. I can tell if it is messing with me when I suddenly feel a sense of fear or dread, followed by seeing the figure of a dark cloaked, shadowy being with a deer skull. I tended to walk around the back, and during that time I felt a sense of dread despite feeling great and just fine beforehand. I had a friend over quite a bit before I left for college. We would walk together, and he would sense someone watching us, but I never felt that way. I never really saw this thing, except maybe one night where it was storming outside and it was dark. We had gotten back from taking my friend back home, and my mom rode along. We pulled up to the garage, which is separate from the house, and as we pulled up I saw a large black mass that I knew usually wasn't there outside the kitchen window. I ran inside quickly as I felt like I saw the mass move as I got out of the car. When my brother moved to dad's and I went to college, everything stopped. Grandma mentioned that the house felt lighter. Now I feel like something is happening again. One night I was in the shower, and I saw a shadowy ball go from the left to the right at the bottom of the tub on the outside. I saw the shadowy ball through the shower curtain, and then I noticed it again at the top of the tub, moving from left to right. Suddenly after that, I experienced flashes of a creature appearing in various locations around the property, with the last sighting being of it walking into the tree line behind Grandma's and Poppy's house, near the restroom, where I later saw some movement outside the window. The thing had obsidian black skin, black eyes with red rings, and the nose and ears of a goblin of Gringotts from Harry Potter. At night I don't like to be outside at my grandparents' house. I often have Mom walk me back over to Grandma and Poppy's house when it's dark and I'm over at Mom and my stepdad's house, which is across the driveway. The spot I feel safest and not afraid at night is my room since all the windows are covered. I am uncertain about the nature of this entity. I am confident it remains somewhere on the farm. I feel like my nightmares are worse at home than anywhere else. The shadow in the cemetery. About 10 years ago, some friends and I went to play flashlight tag in the local cemetery at night. We split into 2 groups. So some time goes by, and I spot some of my friends on the other side of the cemetery and start running to catch them, but even though I was running, it felt like I wasn't getting any closer, and I started to get the feeling I wasn't even in that cemetery anymore. I knew that cemetery like the back of my hand, and everything just seemed out of place. After a while I finally got to the other side, and I realized it wasn't my friends because whatever it was that I saw started climbing the tree backwards while still facing me. Then 2 things happened that I'll never forget. 1. I realized what I was looking at wasn't my friends, it was a shadow in the vague shape of a human. 2. I heard one of my friends call my name from behind me. I looked back and saw they were on the other side of the cemetery, the side I had come running from. A chill quite literally went down my spine, and I bolted back to the car we all came in. They were just as afraid as I was because they had apparently had a similar experience where they thought they had seen me and ran over before realizing I was on the other side of the cemetery and they were looking at what I guess you would call a shadow person. We got the hell out of there, and aside from the car ride home and early the next morning, we haven't talked about it to each other ever since that night. The figure from my backyard. I was in my backyard playing with my sister. At the time, I was 4, and my sister was 8. It was the middle of summer, and we were playing with the hose. We were soaking wet and having the time of our lives. My sister, let's call her Alexa, went inside to grab some food for us. I was sitting on the deck and had a sudden urge to look at the big tree next to our garage. I did and saw the silhouette of a woman. One that looked like my mother. Now, she died a month before I turned 2, so I have no memories of her, and I only knew what she looked like through pictures in our living room. When I saw this figure, I was in awe because it was beautiful. I had never seen anything like it. I walked toward it at a pace so fast I was almost running into my mother's arms. The figure came towards me, ready to hug me, and I reached her. I wrapped my arms around her, and she wrapped hers around me and held me for what felt like an eternity, but I enjoyed it because it was my mother I had never really met. She said something I couldn't understand, but I didn't care. I said, Mom, is it really you?" There was a silence, and she was starting to let go of me, so I did the same. She put one hand on one of my shoulders and her other hand on my other shoulder, and we stared into each other's eyes. She said, "Oh sweetie, I'm not your mother." Her voice started turning into something demonic and warped. It scared me, so I jumped back, causing her hands or its hands to come off my shoulders. It started to change its appearance. Horns grew out of its forehead, devil wings emerged, and the body underwent the most significant transformation. The skin turned coal black, and it became taller. The nails turned into claws, and then I heard my sister calling my name in her cheerful voice. I turned around and she saw I was crying and terrified. She quickly set down 2 plates on the deck, and she ran to me, and I ran to her. I hugged her tightly and even grabbed her shirt to hold onto her. She decided we should go inside our room and get me to settle down. I started seeing that figure when I was alone with that tree in the backyard. Every summer, on a specific day each year, the same event would occur. The hugging, the joy, the fear. One day the tree had to be cut down for some reason. I didn't see the figure for 2 years after that. Starting last month, work began to chop the giant logs of the cut down tree into smaller pieces so that we could dispose of them. On the same night that we began the chopping, I started to notice random cuts on my body each morning. Each one only lasted a few days. And no, I wasn't working on the tree, it was only my dad. But it would be hard to shower because the water made it hurt more. I think I finally found out why that has been happening. One night I woke up to a weird pain in my back. I was lying on my stomach when I woke up and checked the time, 3:46 a.m., it said. "Ah, just great," I moaned to myself. I turned over and saw the same demonic figure, but even more warped, standing over me with the claws right where the pain in my back was. And it had the creepiest smile I had ever seen. Because the teeth were sharp, they looked as sharp as a knife, and each tooth was blood red. What did that thing do in my backyard, And what did it want from me? I wonder now. I think I saw a skinwalker with my native friend. While we were camping by a lake in the middle of the night, my friend pointed out that there were glowing eyes staring at us from a distance in a pitch-black field on the bank. This, of course, got my attention, and I assumed it was a deer at first, but the way it was staring at us, not taking its eyes off us, started to give us a creepy feeling as we were cooking and eating food. The eyes were glowing brightly, but there was no light nearby or directed towards them. I have been hunting and have shot and seen deer in the darker evening but never remember seeing their eyes glow. I know deer eyes glow, but I didn't think they glowed in pitch-black darkness. We decided to try to approach it with flashlights while stomping and yelling to try to scare it or get some movement confirmation, but the eyes just stayed in place and didn't react, which started to freak us out, so we backed it up without ever being able to make out a body. We decided to return to our previous activities while occasionally keeping an eye on the glowing eyes. No one noticed the eyes getting farther away or leaving, but at one point we all noticed they were just gone like nothing, and we never heard any footsteps or hopping as if a deer might have trotted off. We wrote this off as a deer, but I always questioned it because of the feeling we all got during the experience and the odd behavior. And then I looked into skinwalkers recently and realized they are from Native American past stories, and my friend who was with me has a lot of native blood in him. He is native to the point where if you saw him and his features, it would make sense. He even has the card for his tribe. And what made me share this story is that exact reason. Additionally, I learned that when skinwalkers transform into animals, their eyes are said to remain human and glow. After looking up glowing deer eyes, I was even more freaked out because the eyes I remember seeing did not seem to be that far apart and seemed like they were completely forward facing and not sideways facing. Maybe it was a curious deer in shock when we tried to spook it, and it couldn't see us well, and once we ignored it a bit more, we just never caught it walking away until it was far enough to run without us hearing it. What I saw, thinking about it, and writing this gives me chills because of the ominous feeling I had during the experience. Now knowing the behavior and the appearance of what a skinwalker is supposed to be and comparing it to the experience I had with my native friend is freaking me out and giving me goosebumps. I was getting chills coming to these realizations and goosebumps writing this. What do you have to say, or what are you thinking of this? I am almost convinced I may have had a supernatural experience. I lived in a haunted flat when I was a child. My family lived in a flat above our family business from when I was 4 until I was 14. When I was a kid, I always felt scared of being upstairs. I felt there was a presence there. I shared a bedroom with my brother. I even peed in a bucket downstairs for a while, as I was afraid of going upstairs. During my childhood, I had terrible nightmares. They were difficult to describe. I felt emotions during them, confusion, anger. I was scared to close my eyes to sleep at night. I sensed something in the bedroom or in the corridor. I used to sleepwalk, and I woke up in the living room when it was pitch black. When I was about 12, 2 big things happened. First, there was a videotape incident. I was watching the Amityville Horror on VHS when I was called down into the shop for dinner on an intercom in the living room. The intercom was linked to the shop downstairs. I stopped the VHS in the middle of the film and left the tape in the machine. I had dinner downstairs and came back up to the flat. When I walked into the living room, I saw that the VHS tape was taken out of the video machine and put in the middle of the living room floor. The VHS tape was rewound to the beginning. No one had been in the flat. We were all having dinner in the shop while I was gone. A few months after, there was a second incident. It was June, and it was about 6 p.m., and it was bright and sunny. I was alone in the flat in the living room. The living room door opened, and it was a strong draft that blew it open. The carpet was quite thick, and it would take effort to open the living room door. When I went to close the door, the wind got stronger and stronger. I could hear the force of the wind. I ended up struggling for 2 minutes against the force trying to open the door. I thought I was going to have a heart attack. I was so scared. I didn't dare peek behind the door. After a struggle, the sound and the wind just stopped, and I managed to close the door. I lay down against the door for hours and waited for my parents to finish work and come back home. I never told my parents about this, as they weren't the types to believe in all this. When I returned home in 2015 at the age of 35, I shared my experiences with my father. He asked me why I didn't tell him before. He told me he never felt a presence in the flat. But he did say that the mother of the previous owners of the flat died in the bedroom that I slept in. She was an immigrant from Hong Kong who didn't speak English. The other thing he said was that he spoke to the new owners of the flat, and the lady who lived there saw a ghost of a woman walking from my old bedroom to the bathroom. My blood ran cold. My own paranormal experience. One weekend my cousin asked me to hang out with him at his grandparents' ranch. So I asked permission from my parents. They said yes. While we were there, we played around the yard like kids do. I was 12, and my cousin was 11. We went with his younger sister and his aunt. She was responsible for us. She did a wonderful job making us dinner and our beds. The house we slept in was small, just a kitchen and a living room. Studio-like. When night fell, that was when things got weird. We all went to sleep, and in the middle of the night I woke up. I don't know what time it was because it was too dark to see the clock. There were only 2 windows, one to the north and one to the south. 2 doors, front and back. While everyone was asleep, I was just lying there, and then I saw some bright lights, 3 of them. Kind of like big sparklers falling from the sky. They fell into the sheep corral. I thought of them as fireworks that misfired. Later, about 10 minutes after that, I heard some strange noises coming from the south window. Like a cat hissing. The strange thing was that it was speaking Navajo, but its voice sounded like a hissing cat. I grew up hearing Navajo, so I know it when I hear it, but its voice was that of a cat. Then, in a flash, it was Navajo speaking at the north window again. I tried to wake up my cousin's aunt, but she would not wake. Then I tried waking up my cousins. No matter how hard I shook them, they would not wake. It taunted me the whole night until the sun started to rise. As soon as there was light in the sky, it disappeared. I never went back there again, and I've never been so traumatized in my life. One time, I was in the car with my mom and brother. The car was at a standstill, and my mom and brother were looking straight ahead and discussing something, and I was in the back behind the passenger seat, looking out of the window on my side. I saw a little boy, maybe 4 to 5 years old. He was walking up towards the car. He was wearing a dirty, oversized white shirt with holes in it. I wondered why a child so young was walking alone, especially because it had just gotten dark. It wasn't late, maybe past 6 p.m. or almost 7 p.m. As I was watching him, he shapeshifted into something I fail to properly describe even to this day. It had long limbs and was skeletal, the height of an average man. The skin was white, as if it had been painted with chalk or flour, and the paint was cracking off. The face was also stark white with piercing eyes, and its expression was pulled into a snarl or grimace, or something. It took off running, then flying, toward the car, and I knew it was coming for me. I started screaming, and my mom and brother were startled. I couldn't get the words out to describe what was happening. I had scrambled to the other side of the car, behind the driver's seat, and was trying to explain what was wrong. I looked away for a moment, and when I looked back, the boy/creature was gone. I was crying because I was so scared. I couldn't explain what had happened because of it. I just kept saying that the boy had turned into something. My mom looked where I was pointing, and there was nothing there, but then she spotted the boy, only this time he was on the other side of the car, which would have been impossible in such a short amount of time if he had been walking at a normal speed. Like I said, he looked very young, and I guess she was concerned and trying to understand what was happening, so she rolled down her window and started to call him over. I begged her not to, but she did. She asked him where he was going, and I remember he just sort of gestured in the distance. I was still crying and begging her not to talk to him at all. I think she became more unsettled because she just sort of stared at him and then rolled her window back up, and we drove off. When we parked the car at home, she asked me twice to explain to her what had happened. My brother kept asking the next morning if I was sure that was what I saw. I just stopped talking about it, and we didn't discuss it again until December last year. She said she didn't remember it. However, years later, whenever I am out at night and notice someone walking alongside the road, I refrain from looking at them too closely. That was the most scared I've ever been in my life. I am the only one experiencing supernatural things in my family. So am I, 17, male. I've been having weird encounters with otherworldly beings. I have always been intrigued by the idea of communicating with spirits, and as a result, I have engaged in such communication, leading to interactions with various spirits. I'm from India. Our locality is home to a significant number of Hindus and their worship centers, along with sacred forests that these individuals revere. My family is very Orthodox Catholic, and so am I. I do believe in Jesus as well as the devil. A few months ago, my cousins visited, and we talked about how dull it was to stay at home, so we decided to explore the sacred woods, despite our family's warnings. We went anyway, so it was around 6:30. Although it was not completely dark outside, the thick canopy of the forest made it feel very dark inside. For your information, this area is forest-like and covers around 100 acres of land with no nearby residents. So we just started walking through the forest, and it was around 10 minutes into the walk that I noticed the entire atmosphere had changed, and it was eerily silent. I was a bit anxious about going into the forest but still went with them. After about a kilometer in the forest, I spotted this white, transparent humanoid figure along the tree line. I suddenly stopped and pointed in the direction of the figure to my cousins, and they said they couldn't see anything and said maybe it was just fog, but I knew deep down that it wasn't safe. To go into the forest, I asked my cousins to get back to the house. Since that day, I've been seeing the same figure almost everywhere, and I can't get loose from it. It feels like I'm being haunted by it. I've been talking to spirits, as I've said, for the past few weeks. I just get so many dreams about a 12-year-old girl named Lizzie. I always wake up from the dream at around 1 a.m. It's almost like a routine for me. I was chilling on my balcony one day when I saw the same girl again along the tree lines of the forest. She just disappeared in the blink of an eye. Lady in white is following me around. A month ago, I went on a trip with my family and some friends. It was a birthday celebration and also our first trip of our summer vacation. My baby cousin celebrated his 4th birthday, and my mother had recently returned to the Philippines for my graduation. The trip was to a farm, with a pool and other activities. I thought it had a barn or something, but it didn't. The place had nothing more than a cabin, a small lake, and a pool. When we got to the farm, my mom said that this place looks like it has entities and ghosts around. And surprisingly, she was right. I went swimming with my cousins, and when I finished, my aunt informed me that my mom, along with my siblings, left. At first I thought it was a joke, but it was not. I was kind of pissed because they didn't leave me any underwear, but my anger turned into fear once I saw that thing. We roasted marshmallows and attempted to make s'mores. I failed. I strolled around with my cousin's cousin, aka my bestie. At the corner of my eye, I caught a glimpse of a white dress and long black hair by the woods near the pool. Someone called my name, diverting my attention elsewhere, and when I turned back, it had vanished. As a test of courage, my bestie and I walked near the pool, but we ran away, feeling shivers run down our spines. The next day my bestie and I were swimming again with my male cousin. We were joking about ghosts, and my bestie and I sat next to each other laughing. Just as we stopped laughing, we heard the faint laugh of a woman. We looked at each other with wide eyes. I asked her if she heard it too, and she nodded. We ran to our male cousin screaming our heads off. We shrugged it off but continued to be scared the rest of the day. Later on, we followed our male cousin to the pool table, watching him play. We teased him about ghosts again, and that's when I saw it. The same white dress and long black hair were floating near a table. I blinked, and then it was gone. I don't think my cousins believed me, and I kind of don't believe myself. In the Philippines there's this ghost we call a white lady. It's seen in mountains or jungles but is not seen by everyone. Unfortunately, I was one of the few who saw them. There are a lot of weird ghosts in the Philippines, but I'm really scared of the white lady because of my encounter with it. It always tried to play with my mind, but I left the place earlier to go back to my mom. That's pretty much it. Michigan encounter. Okay, I was in the Manistee/Cadillac area in 2019 at a campground. Sorry, I have no details on where it's been a while. I encountered something that is the most supernatural/cryptid experience in my life to this day. It had a pale face and big black pits for eyes. It was watching my dog and me on the beach from the shadows of the tree line/the fence it was peeking over on a clear night in mid to late July in the moonlight. Made my German Shepherd's fur stand up and caused her to lowly growl. I looked at the direction of her growl and saw that same pale face staring at me from about 6 yards away. I gasp and stare, then I see a matching face appear behind the first one, and it seems to have started standing up, or I could sense it moving closer. The thing is, since I was by myself with the dog, I was already very sensitive to noise. I could hear when people would walk on the pavement and the crunching of gravel. I didn't hear these beings, they were so silent, and I snatched my dog's leash and hauled towards the bathroom and showers at the campground, the brightest source of light other than the moon. I stood in the light with my dog, also still just as freaked out. I can't forget that night. Is there anyone else in Michigan in the area that has seen anything like I have? Unexplained childhood experience. I'm going to preface this by saying I don't really believe in the supernatural, but this is something that happened in my childhood that I still tell people about as the one thing that I can't really explain. When I was 10, my family rented a house that had a carport that was later converted into an enclosed garage. Because of this, there was a room in the basement, full of old furniture and junk from the home's owner, that could only be entered through a ground-level window in the garage. The room had a false wall built in the back separating it from the hot water tank, which you could access from a door in the basement, but the other half of this room was inaccessible aside from this window. Being 10 years old, this made the room a really cool hangout for me and my friends, since it was completely isolated from the rest of the house, and adults couldn't enter it, at least not without some significant effort. One day I was down there with my younger sister, 8, and my best friend, 10. We had a game we liked to play, which I think we called nurse. One person was chosen to be the nurse, the other kids pretended to sleep, and the nurse left the room and turned off the lights. The kids left inside the room would then jump around and make all kinds of noise, and it was the goal of the nurse to enter the room quickly enough to turn on the lights and catch someone moving. Whoever was caught was then it. My sister was chosen as the nurse. After she left the room, my best friend and I jumped around the bed, hollering and having fun. Then my sister comes back downstairs, pokes her head through the window, and does not turn on the light. I stare at her and see that there's something wrong with her eye. Of course the room is still dark, but it looks like she's fallen and there's a huge red bruise surrounding her eye, or like it's bleeding. It's hard to describe, but the flesh around the eye looks somewhat sunken and wrinkled. I'm staring at her, trying to figure out if it's a trick of the light or she's hurt herself, and she doesn't say anything. Then I hear my best friend next to me say, "What happened to your eye?" My sister then covers her eye, the one that looked injured, and runs away. My best friend and I look at each other, horrified, wordlessly confirming that we both just saw the same thing. I am thinking that my sister has hurt herself in some way, so I and my best friend run upstairs, where I find my sister in the kitchen talking to our mom. I grab her by the shoulder and I ask her what's wrong, what happened, but when she turns around, her eye is fine. I tell her what my friend and I saw, that she came downstairs, and it looked like her eye had been gouged out or something. My sister gets annoyed and says she didn't go downstairs. This, of course, really freaked me and my friend out, and being 10, I made up some elaborate ghost story to explain what we had just seen. We were so scared, I can't remember if we ever went back to play in the basement again until it was converted into a bedroom for my older brother. But as the years went on, I still thought about the incident. I tried asking my sister about it a few times. She continued to insist that she never went downstairs. Once she told me that she did go downstairs, but she thought I had just been trying to scare her. When I asked her why she covered her eye, she couldn't explain it. Last time I asked her, she said she didn't remember. My best friend still remembers it, though. We both recall the same incident. I wish I could get a straight answer from my sister, though. Maybe I could accept that the huge bruise was some weird shadow that my friend and I both saw, but it's the idea that she never even went downstairs in the first place that really freaks me out. I think I saw something. To be honest, I don't really believe in anything supernatural, but there was one time I saw something I can't explain, and it terrified me. It happened in Colorado. I was walking down a ski track at night after a party, and I saw what at first glance seemed to be a very tall person dressed in black but with very white skin walking from the forest and across the track. The weirdest thing was that the arms seemed to be too long and flailing wildly, kind of like those inflatable things stores use. I basically froze and only saw it from a distance. It didn't seem to notice me. I actually had to go the same way it went, towards a few condominium buildings, so I waited a while and went and didn't see anyone or anything. In all honesty, I was scared shitless and would love to hear any opinions on what it might have been, if anything. Yes, when I was 12. My little brother, older sister, 2 friends and I used to go biking down the dirt roads in our city all the time, a small city in the Canadian prairies. There was an abandoned farmhouse in the middle of nowhere that we came across one summer afternoon. It sat about half a kilometer deep in the fields, so we had to leave our bikes behind to trudge through the thick grass/obstacles in the way to get to the actual barn house. Being kids, we were all pushing each other to go first, getting more scared as we got closer. By the time we were about 10 feet from the main front porch entrance, I had a shiver literally shoot down my spine. I immediately looked at my sister and told her that going inside wasn't a good idea and that we should head back instead. She reassured me everything was okay and it was just creepy looking. I reluctantly agreed, and we went inside. As soon as we entered, the main floor area felt cold. This was on a hot summer day, mind you. Around the living room corner was the dark abyss that led to the basement. The one friend with us decided to act cool and went down quick without even telling us. He was down there not even a minute before he ran back outside with his face as pale as a ghost. This was our group's tough friend, Dylan, so when we saw him looking so shaken, we all immediately ran out to our bikes. This is where shit gets crazy. As we were booking it out of there, random music, like a really old record player, came from upstairs. We never got a chance to even look up there, only on the main floor, and Dylan checked the basement quickly. At this point my legs felt weak, and it was almost like in a dream where you can barely make it back to your bike. Dylan's bike chain was torn off, and his tire was popped. He started crying like a madman, so we ditched his bike, and he hopped on one of our handlebars, and we got the hell out of there. This is the part where it may be hard to believe, but I know it's true because my sister also saw it with her own eyes, and she is the last person to believe in the paranormal. When we were a safe distance away but still in viewpoint, my sister and I looked back and both saw a dark gray, almost smoky, shadow-like figure standing at the top window. We never told anyone else in the group because we didn't want to freak them out any more than they already were. This is a day that I will remember for the rest of my life. The barn house isn't there anymore, and I haven't been to an abandoned place since. Something I saw when I was 4. I woke up today suddenly remembering a weird incident that happened to me when I was 4 years old. I don't recall many things from back when I was 4, however, this incident is something I've never forgotten. It was a regular evening. My parents and I were having supper. After dinner all of us were in the family room. My parents were watching the television. I went towards my parents' bedroom to grab a toy that I had left there when suddenly I saw a figure. It was a figure of a girl. She was taller than me and was legit sparkling. She looked like a fairy or an angel. I remember her smiling at me. It was a warm smile. Rattled, I ran out of that room towards my dad and took him with me to show him what I saw. But when I took him there, the angel or the fairy had vanished. I was very confused. You guys got any thoughts on this? I'm 17 now, and I still don't know what I saw that day. And I'm pretty sure it wasn't a hallucination or an illusion. Something supernatural. This was back in the summer of 2012. I was in high school then, and over the summer break I had become absolutely obsessed with this show called Supernatural. The story of two brothers, Sam and Dean Winchester, hunting monsters and demons, it was my absolute favorite. I have always had a knack for digging deep into the paranormal world, a little too interested in the other side. Watching the show only increased my interest in the paranormal. I am unsure how many of you listening to this have actually seen it, but even if you haven't, I will provide some context for the next part of my story. So, in the initial seasons of this show, they used to show exorcisms and various rituals, chanting spells and all that jazz, you know. Watching those really intrigued me, and I wanted to look into this more to see for myself if the spells were real as such. With the power of the internet at my disposal, I decided to explore keywords such as demon, spells, witchcraft, etc. one night. After perusing the contents of various sites, I was frankly getting tired when I finally came across this one. Oh, how I wish I remembered its name so that I could share it here. This site offered an incredible variety of spells, ranging from white magic to dark magic, including summoning fairies and demons. It had everything. Being young and naive as I was, I started chanting the spells out loud. I started with the fairies and moved on to demons. Yeah, I know what you are thinking. I am crazy, yes. And just a tiny detail, all these spells required either a few ingredients or specific conditions, such as being performed on a certain day under the moon or in the forest, but I ignored all those rules and went straight for the spells. The spells were long, and I have the attention span of a hummingbird, so I read aloud only half of each of them. By the time I was done, it was pretty late, so I crashed in my bed and immediately fell asleep. I woke up the following morning with backaches, probably because I was sitting in front of the computer for far too long, and 3 long nail marks on one of my thighs. It was red and kind of sore. I immediately checked my nails to rationalize the situation and saw that they have not grown since the last time I had them trimmed, and I also sleep alone. This was the first incident. I brushed it off for that time and went about my day. Later that night, I hopped on my computer and started to go through those spells again. But tonight something happened. I couldn't sleep the entire night, kept waking up in the middle of the night, and throughout had this sinking feeling that I was being watched in my sleep or someone was standing near my bed. I could properly get some sleep when the sunlight crept through the gaps in my window. When I finally woke up, what I encountered made the hair on the back of my neck stand on end. There were more marks this morning, long, deep ones this time. 3 on my other thigh and 3 on my left arm. Now I was scared. I had watched enough horror films and TV series to know what was happening. I concluded that I was being haunted by some kind of entity, probably an evil one. Why the marks otherwise? I guess while I was reading out the spells, I had done it way too diligently and had actually summoned a demon. I told my parents what was happening, and at first they didn't believe me. Then I showed them the marks, and they tried to somehow rationalize them. I quit trying to convince them, and that night I didn't dare to open my computer. Again, I had a restless sleep, waking up often with the feeling of being watched. And again the next morning, voila, you guessed it, more red marks. This time it was also on my right arm and a few on my back. Even though I had stopped going on that site, this ordeal continued for a few weeks before, suddenly, out of the blue, it stopped one day. I realized that I could sleep peacefully again because there were no new marks. Over the years I have told this story to many people, and no one could give me a proper answer as to why it happened or what it was. So, here I am, open to hear your theories and talk about it. Please comment if you know what it is or have faced something similar. Thank you. A sighting 20 years ago still haunts me. When I was roughly 10 and my sister was about 8, my family moved across the country for my dad's job. We didn't have much of our stuff yet, as we were still waiting on the moving truck to arrive. We didn't really care, as we had been living in a hotel for the last 3 months, or, well, house hunting, and were just excited to have space to run around again. The house was fairly large but old and laid out very strangely. While exploring the basement, we discovered a part of the pine paneling on the walls in the bathroom could be moved. On the other side there was a large crawl space. We gathered the few toys we did have and figured we could make it into a play area. Dumb kids, I know. The crawl space was abnormally large and seemed to continue well past the end of the house and under the lawn. There was an obnoxiously bright red carpet covering the entire floor, and the area was well lit by a couple of light bulbs except for the very back corners. After playing down there peacefully for a few minutes by the entrance, we began to hear movement in the very back of the area. We assumed it was a stray cat or another animal that had made its way down there. We began looking around for the source of the noise. At the same time, we both caught sight of what it was. There was a fully white creature crawling slowly from one end of the crawl space to the other. It was humanoid in shape and size but had no body hair, no eyes or true facial features, and long, scraggly fingers and toes. The thing was crawling on all fours. My sister and I looked at each other and froze before making a break for it and slamming the panel back in place, abandoning all of our toys down there. We never spoke of this moment again until years later when we were teens and telling ghost stories with our friends. We both remembered the moment exactly the same and both had nightmares about it for years afterward. Until that moment, I had hoped it was just a nightmare, but she confirmed it was real. Weird things happening in my garage last week. Working on a very old and large model boat I found in a bric-a-brac shop, I had to bolt a couple of pieces of steel together for the stand. Dogs are dozing in the sun by the garage door, at peace with the world. I clamped the steel down and put the nut and bolt down on the bench next to me while I drilled the hole. Didn't have to move my feet, the nut and bolt were there on the bench right next to me, nothing else was anywhere near them. Cut the hole and reach for the nut and bolt, nowhere to be seen. Move on in 10 minutes, and I now need to drill a couple of holes in a small piece of oak. Same bench, same job. Didn't have a 13mm wood bit, so I'd been out and bought one that morning. Cut the first hole, took the drill bit out, and placed it on the bench within easy reach while I fitted another steel cutting bit. That small task took 5 minutes. I reached for the 13mm bit, completed the cutting, and then it disappeared. No sign of it. My wife sees my bewilderment from the kitchen window, and after a bit of sign language/lip reading, eventually comes outside to see what the problem is. She casts her eyes around the garage and points to another bench 20 feet away at the back of the garage and says, "Is that it?" Of course it is, it's the only 13mm bit I have, and it's brand new, but I had hardly moved my feet from where I'd been working and certainly hadn't been anywhere near the other end of the garage. I retrieve the bit, fit it back in the drill, and I'm muttering and cursing to myself, quietly swearing and wondering WTF is going on when the dog, who hasn't stirred for half an hour or more, gets up and starts staring at the back wall of the garage. Then he starts growling. I look straight at him, he's looking straight at me, and I start to say something like, "WTF is the matter with?" When his eyes look straight over my left shoulder toward the back wall just as that nut and bolt hit the shelves above the bench I'm next to. The dog went mental and then legged it, quickly followed by me. I'm a rational 70-year-old ex-police officer, and I haven't got the slightest idea what happened in there. Saw this weird thing when I was 10. Not too much of an interesting story, and it's not as if I believe I saw a ghost. Nonetheless, at the time I was pretty freaked out, and it's definitely the scariest thing that's happened to me. I went on holiday with my parents when I was around 10 too, I think, Marbella. It was the first time I had gone somewhere that gets really hot. I live in the UK, and it only ever gets to 30-odd degrees Celsius at the most. I was in the same room as my parents in a single bed, and my mom and dad were in a double bed next to me. The room was pretty big. I still am not sure why this happened, but it just did. I was possibly too hot and hallucinated it, but I don't remember being hot at the time because the room had air conditioning. I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was fully awake. I've never been a good sleeper. When I wake up, that's it, I'm awake. There's no period of time where I don't know what's going on. My brain just goes from 0 to 100 instantly. What I saw really ducked me up for a while, as I was scared I would see it again, but I never did. After I had been awake for 5 or 10 minutes, I went to get up to go to the toilet, as I really needed a wee. The room was reasonably dark, but I could still see pretty well. I sat up and looked in front of me, and there was this sort of red, slightly hairy/fuzzy demon's head hanging from the ceiling where the ceiling and the wall met opposite me. It had a long neck, a big mouth, and sharp teeth. That's all I really remember about how it looked, but it was pretty big. The creature was 3 or 4 times bigger than a human head, and it appeared extremely angry. I froze and just sat looking at it. I could see it clear as day, and it was animated, like bobbing up and down a bit. After a few seconds I thought to myself, okay, this can't be real. Monsters don't exist, I have to be seeing things. I wanted to get a closer look and scooted forward in my bed a bit and squinted at it. It opened its mouth and said, "Time to choose a head." Not only was the voice clear as day but also super deep, it sounded exactly like what a demon would sound like. I remember the voice making my body feel as if it were rumbling from the vibrations of its loud speech. It shook me to my core. After it said that, it looked at me, then turned and looked at my parents, then back to me and so forth. By then I was shook and scooted back in my bed. Luckily for me, the light switch was right next to me. I woke my dad up and asked him if I could turn on the light. I did, and it just vanished like it was never there. I'm aware this was a hallucination, but it's the only time I've ever hallucinated before, and at the time I had no reason to have hallucinated. It was random. I could have maybe been really tired or had jet lag, etc., but I've gone days and days without sleep and not seen things. I'm aware I did wake up, so I may have still been dreaming, but that seems unlikely. It wasn't sleep paralysis because I could move around, and I had already been awake and lying in bed for 5 to 10 minutes before I saw it. The image of that demon's head is burned into my mind forever. I'll literally never forget about it. It was so incredibly vivid it could have been real and wouldn't have seemed any different. It hasn't scarred me or anything, though. I just remember it really well, and it's always my answer for the scariest thing that's happened to me. Second scariest, I had a bad trip on bath salts once. As a 10-year-old, I handled it pretty well, but I was still quite scared. I think if anyone saw this at any age, they'd be scared. While it may not be the most remarkable story, I felt compelled to share it, as I have never recounted it to anyone before. I ran away from a month-long canoeing camp, walked 20 miles without water, and hallucinated hearing Native American chanting, drums beating, and wolves howling. I was 12. A local man from an indigenous tribe came to talk to me when I was found and asked if I heard anything, as it was an area of land that was sacred to his people. Of course no one actually believes me when I tell this story. Paranormal/supernatural encounter. When I was approximately 10 or 11 years old, an event occurred that I have only shared with a select few individuals, as it may seem quite unbelievable. I was sleeping on a mattress on the floor next to my grandparents' bed. Right as I was falling asleep, I suddenly heard an intense roaring sound, like a bunch of cars racing at full speed, even though the house was silent and no one else heard it. The noise stopped abruptly, and the next second, I felt invisible arms wrap around me tightly from behind. I panicked, jumped onto my grandparents' bed screaming, and pushed my head underneath the blanket. A few seconds later, 3 or 4 tall figures appeared in the room. They looked like men wearing old plague doctor masks, the ones with the long beaks, but without the beaks, and dark robes, holding thick leathery brown books. They were staring down at me or the books and chanting something I couldn't understand. Only I could see and hear them. My grandparents couldn't see the figures, but they knew something was seriously wrong because I was hysterical. While I was under the blanket, something ripped it completely off the bed and threw it to the floor. My grandpa started yelling, "Get these things out of my house," were his exact words. Then the bathroom faucet kept turning itself on full blast every time my grandfather tried to shut it off. After the masked figures finally vanished, I started seeing movement everywhere, spiders swinging from the ceiling, bugs crawling on the walls, shadowy outlines of beings just standing motionless in the corners. I could tell they were there even though I couldn't see them clearly. When everything finally stopped, there was a strange burned mark left on the wall that hadn't been there before. We were a completely ordinary family, no occult stuff, no drugs, nothing that could explain it. I've never had any other hallucinations or mental health issues. Most people I've told think I dreamed it or made it up, but my grandparents were there and saw how terrified I was and the things that happened in the room that night. It felt as though a portal to another realm opened exclusively for me, and it diminished my sense of safety as a child. I still don't know what it was, but I know it was real. I'm hoping for some clarity on this or some sort of explanation. Mimic? My coworker and I were standing by each other while cleaning tonight, and we both heard her name get whispered. She heard it in her right ear, and I heard it in my left ear. It took us all of 10 minutes to figure out that it had to have come from a quarter, It was the only thing in proximity to us at the time. There was absolutely nobody near us while we were cleaning. Just this quarter. We both got a very uneasy feeling in our stomachs and then a huge wave of anxiety. Another one of our coworkers walked into the kitchen and grabbed the quarter without any knowledge of what we just encountered. We went outside for fresh air and noticed the moment he grabbed the said quarter, that gut-wrenching feeling went away. She then had a weird feeling that something was wrong with her sister, so she called her up. Mind you, I've never met, heard, or seen her sister before in the 5 years of knowing this coworker of mine, either. But when her sister answered the phone, the voice clicked. It was hers. It was so eerie because I heard a whisper of my coworker's name, but it was coming from her sister's mouth. I've been known to hear voices in the past, but nothing, and I mean absolutely nothing, like this. We are now both terrified that something is out to get either her or her sister. Not likely, but does anyone have any information as to what this could be? We are both very highly superstitious. Something I will never forget and still get goosebumps thinking about to this day. This occurred about 8 to 9 years ago. At the time, I was living with my dad in a 2-bedroom apartment. The bedroom drawn was attached to a bathroom, 2 doors lead into it. One door was accessible from the front, and the other was only openable from my room. Thankfully, the lock was on my side. Beyond the living area is a hallway that leads to my dad's bedroom. The red lines drawn are the doors, the blue dot is the chair I was in at the time of this encounter, and the light blue line is the placement of my TV. We had lived in this apartment for over a year at this point, and nothing had ever happened. I was a believer in the supernatural even as a teenager before this occurred. Almost everyone in my immediate family had seen or heard supernatural things before, except for me, because the encounters they described were from an apartment where they all lived before I was born. However, despite believing after hearing the stories they told me, I'd never seen anything firsthand. The night this occurred, I was up late, playing video games, not sure of the exact time, but I know it was at least after midnight. I'm sitting in the chair facing my TV, maybe 5 feet from my doorway. My dad was fast asleep by this point in the night. And every single light was off in the apartment, no one else lived here. My bedroom door was wide open, and the only sources of light were my TV and this fan I had turned on, which had these 3 blue lights for the switches on the fan. The door that leads into the bathroom from the outside was also open inwards, and the door connecting my room to the bathroom was closed, thankfully. So as I'm playing, it's pretty much dead quiet, as I don't want to wake my dad. However, I suddenly sensed movement to the right of me, out in the area right outside of my door. I didn't hear anything, though, but still turned to see what it was. I fully turned just in time to see the forearm and right hand of a person walking into the bathroom. Their skin was dark, but I could see the blue light reflecting off of it. There was no sound of footsteps, and I wondered what happened when they entered the bathroom. Nothing, no lights turned on, no noise, nothing. I was confused and called out, "Dad?" No response, and still no lights turned on. The door to the bathroom still hung open. I sat there watching my doorway for what felt like 5 minutes in complete silence, but was likely only a few seconds, with every hair on my body standing on end. I'm getting goosebumps typing this out right now just thinking about it. I then leapt up, shut my door, locked it, and immediately ran over to the other door that connects my room/bathroom and locked that too. Safe to say, I stayed up the entire night. Thankfully, this was the first and only time I ever saw something in that apartment. I still have no idea what it could have been. Potentially a shapeshifter in the PNW. About 4 years ago, I took a spontaneous camping/road trip with my friend to Vancouver Island in Canada. The campsite we had initially planned was first come, first serve only, as most reserved spots were at full capacity, and due to ferry delays, we made it onto the island much later than anticipated. We ultimately decided to sleep in her car. We had privacy shields for the windows in case we didn't secure a camping spot, as we intended to drive up a Forest Service road and camp somewhere with a bit of privacy, similar to what I had done in the small town where I lived in the interior of British Columbia. We spent the day hiking just outside of Nanaimo, and a few hours before sunset we chose a service road on our map and set out to find a place to privately park and sleep. The map on my friend's phone had been acting up during our trip, and we chalked it up to bad service on the island, but it took us on this loop through the Lawrenceville area and then up this forested road that connects to a service road back in the direction we came. Along the way, we noticed the number of churches for a small community. We drove up the road, pined for a few minutes, and it was dusky from all the looping. As we came to a clearing in the forest on the passenger side of the car, I watched the tree line and took in the summer air with the window rolled down. As we pass a big bush on the side of the road, a man walks out of the bush, makes eye contact with me, and then turns around and returns back into the bushes and vanishes. My friend and I were both shocked because the bushes were big but not so big that he could walk away without us seeing him come out the other side in the rearview mirror. He also looked like he was trying to be dirty, but he was clean. Hair was disheveled but appeared clean. His clothes were baggy and loose-fitting but appeared clean. His face was clean-shaven, and when he walked away, the bottoms of his feet were clean. In the middle of the forest and bushes, they were clean. He also had an incredibly serious look on his face. All around he was out of place and weird. We kept driving up the road, and once we felt we had put enough distance between us and this man, we pulled a quick U-turn and parked on the other side of the road so we were facing the direction he would be coming from if he did keep walking up this road. We didn't do it intentionally, there was just a little pull-off on that side where we had some space to park safely in. Before we set up to sleep, I pulled out my portable camping bong, and we smoked for approximately 20 minutes. I had noticed during our little sesh that my friend was frequently checking her side and rear view mirrors and occasionally even turning her head fully out the window. We had recently been on a smoking spree, and I attributed it to the strain I purchased for our trip being slightly stronger than usual. I was just about ready to pack it away myself. It was just after 10 p.m., and the sky was becoming completely dark, so I made a mental note of the time and went to drink some water before packing my things away and preparing for the night. I realized my bottle was empty, and my friend let me know that our spare was in the backseat. I turned around to grab it when my eyes instinctively shot upward. Pressed up against the rear windshield of her car, cupping its lack of eyes, was this barely humanoid tree that was made of shadow, and its branches moved like the tentacles of an octopus when it walked. It was so pitch black that I could still see it contrasting against the shadow of the forest. When I made eye contact with it, it had no discernible face or eyes. It immediately shriveled and shrank away, its branches/tentacles moving so fast it almost looked like an animated glitch. I turned around in pure shock and said, "I think I just SA-," and without missing a beat, my friend had the car started with her foot on the gas, and we were ripping back down that road as fast as a Corolla could. We drove in silence, and I sat there with this deep heaviness in my chest. After about 10 minutes of driving, we passed an intersection, and both sighed. We immediately knew that we both felt the heaviness lift off of our chests, as if our physical proximity to it had some sort of effect on us. We finally talked about it once we felt safe, and it turns out while we were smoking, my friend was seeing a shadow of a tree moving across the road and along the tree line frantically and almost human-like in the mirrors of her car in her peripheral vision, but every time she turned around to check the road, there was nothing there. In her periphery, she kept seeing it get closer and closer. She chalked it up to being too stoned after slowing down on smoking, but once it got super close, she lost track of it, and she started to feel scared. Not even a few minutes later I had asked about the water, and that's when I turned around and saw what I saw. As soon as I had started my sentence, she knew what I was going to say. We've ended up sleeping in a well-lit community center parking lot for all of 3 hours before waking up to return home to the mainland and put all of that behind us. Since then, we have visited the island again, and during one of those trips, her map got scrambled once more, directing us back to that location without us realizing it until we were almost there. Thankfully, we drove back to town and went about other activities. Both of us also reported to each other that within the first 2 years of that experience, we had both independently, and without telling the other, experienced the indescribable desire to return. I did return once and walked around with my brother, who had requested to accompany me due to his natural curiosity after I finally disclosed the reasons for our previous silence regarding that camping trip. 2 weeks after I showed him, a local woman went missing, and her belongings were discovered on that road. I have since vowed to never, ever, ever, ever return, not that I really even wanted to the first time. I don't know if the man had anything to do with the cryptid thing I saw, like a shapeshifter, because they came from separate directions, but it was all so suspicious to me that both of those things happened so close together that I assumed they were the same entity. I also don't know why my friend couldn't see it with her eyes and only in the mirror, but when I turned around, I saw it up against the window without needing a mirror or a reflection. I have also had supernatural and paranormal encounters in my life, so I have considered that maybe she isn't prone to those things, but she still saw it in the mirror, so that also didn't make sense to me. The best description I currently have is shapeshifter, but if so, what the hell kind of shape was that? Anyway, if anyone is still listening and knows a specific cryptid that sounds like what I described, let me know. I'm finally feeling brave enough to be open to learning more about what it could be. My friend and I found inconsistencies in the hide-behind theory, and I came across something called Yate-Vio, but since the depictions are only drawings, it's difficult to determine if it refers to the same creature. From what I read, the behavior is different. Curious to know if any locals have seen this and have stories as well. Thanks for your time, guys. Suddenly making sense. When I was a little girl, we lived in this rural neighborhood in central Virginia. Right now the subdivision is filled with houses, but back then there were only about 5 houses along our road. My house backed up to a patch of woods that, even today, is a good size, with a straight shot to a national park. We've had run-ins with everything from black bears to bobcats on that property. Anyway, this story happened when I was 7 or 8 years old, after we had just moved into the house. I was walking our black lab puppy down the road when all of a sudden, Bear stopped. He turned to the lot across the street from my house and started growling. This particular lot would have a house on it 2 years later, but for now it was wild. A dirt ramp of sorts, undoubtedly put in for a future driveway when the lot was sold, led up to a hill probably 10 feet or so. The whole thing, including the ramp, was overgrown with tall grass to the tree line and then a decent-sized patch of trees. The bear continued growling towards the empty lot, and I, being an adventurous sort of kid, decided to investigate. It was the 90s, I spent my childhood exploring every inch of my neighborhood, including that lot. We climbed the grass-covered ramp and peered into the woods. Bear continued to bark and growl, but I was unimpressed. There was nothing there. Or so I thought. From behind one of those trees peeked a human figure. That moved in a very inhuman way. I never got a good look at it, it was silhouetted inside the trees while I was standing in the bright daylight. But its large, buggy eyes stared back at me and my dog. I ran home as fast as I could. My best friend saw one in our woods not too long after that, and she described it as white in color. Together we created this mythos of dinosaurs living in the woods. Shut up, we were 7, and Jurassic Park had just come out. We spent years looking for them, building traps for our dinosaurs, disarming the traps they set for us, and just generally being kids in the woods. As I grew up, I decided that what I saw was probably just a black bear standing on its hind legs, but that description never sat well with me. Bears have a sort of lumbering way they move, even when they're young and small. This was fast and lithe. Bears also have a muzzle, and there was no muzzle on what I saw. Also, what about my friend's sighting? Then I came across other similar accounts. I am completely convinced that both my sighting that day and my friend's sighting later were of a crawler. Something supernatural or just animal mimicry? I wasn't sure where exactly to share this sort of thing, and I thought here might be my best bet for an answer. Last night I and my stepmother were crafting outside around 11 p.m. and heard an owl. And obviously she hooted back at it. After she did, within about 3 seconds it was hooting non-stop and no longer really sounded like an owl, more guttural, but it was making a beeline for us. It sounded as if it were right over the bank as we ran inside. We heard nothing else afterward, but tonight I heard something odd again. I have 2 kittens and heard one meowing at around 10:40 p.m. I figured it was time to feed them, which I did, but I still heard it very faintly. I peeked my head from my bathroom, where I feed them, only to hear it coming from around the area of my window. We do have feral cats, but I am on the 2nd floor, and it sounded relatively loud. I did not look out my window, it has a blackout curtain. I called my boyfriend to calm myself down, and it seemed to stop after that, but this is the 2nd day in a row I've had this odd animal mimicry happening, and I wonder if there's any reasonable explanation for this. Let me tell you real quick one of my few supernatural experiences. About 15 years ago, I was like 16 or 17 years old and lived with my parents in an apartment on the 5th floor. At this time, I went to high school in the morning and used to take a nap during the afternoon. One afternoon, about 4 or 5 p.m., as I was waking from my usual nap, I saw something that truly terrified me. I have slept in my bed, with my feet pointing to the apartment window/small external area. You know that feeling when you are waking up during the day and the sunlight messes with your vision? As I was blinking to adapt to the light, I glanced into the window and saw this being. It was humanoid and completely burnt. Like it was carbonized or it had no skin, just pure exposed flesh. Something like that red Captain America villain. It was looking directly at me, curious and somehow afraid, like it was lost. Of course, at the time, I had a fearful reaction and ran to another room, just so I could process. And when I went back, nothing was there. Today I think that it was maybe a lost soul, but I don't know. Supernatural black dogs of British legend. Primarily associated with British legends, stories about black dogs, ghost dogs, or hellhounds are present in almost every region of the world. Perhaps the first things to come to your mind when thinking of eerie ghost dogs are evil images, death omens, or even the two-headed dog Cerberus from Greek mythology. That makes sense, as most of the time these shadowy creatures are depicted as malevolent beings, but did you know that sometimes they are seen as great protectors too? The immense popularity of dog legends is not a surprise since dogs were humanity's first domesticated animals. The man-dog partnership has been traced back to the Paleolithic era and lasted for thousands of years. To narrow down black dog legends, this will focus on some of the alarming British versions. Black dogs in the United Kingdom. No other place in the world holds more legends, or sightings, of black dogs than the United Kingdom. Each region might even have its own version of the tale, with different names given to the black dogs too, such as Black Shuck, the Girt Dog, Padfoot, Barghest, the Hairy Hound, the Yeth Hound, and the Grim. Like most legends, the origin of this one is hard to establish. Mark Norman, who has been researching the legend of black dogs in England for many years, has traced the earliest accounts in English literature dating back to 1127. According to Norman's studies, black dogs can take different forms, but a few common traits are present in all descriptions. They are very large creatures with shaggy coats and big glowing eyes, usually red in color. Different details make the dogs unique, such as having a chain around their necks, being headless, or even having human faces. Some legends describe the ghost dogs as huge, even as big as a house. Others say they walk on their hind legs. The dark beasts are notorious for disappearing into a mist and leaving no trace of their eerie visits. Although these supernatural animals are most often depicted as malevolent creatures bringing bad luck, black dogs have also had benevolent connotations, as protective spirits attached to a family or a location, such as roads. Legendary creatures. One of the most popular British ghost dog legends is said to have taken place in Bungay, Suffolk. It began with a violent storm breaking out on the morning of 1577 while the parishioners of a church were commemorating a Sunday service. Lit by flashes of fire, a black dog appeared in the church, running around and causing a great deal of panic among the people. The ghost dog claimed the lives of 2 men, who were kneeling in prayer, and caused severe burns on another one. Although that dog portended death and destruction, there are a few benevolent legends involving a black dog, such as the one told by Johnny Greenwood from Swancliffe. The man described being followed by a black dog while walking at night in the woods. The creature remained by his side until he emerged from the trees. Years later, 2 prisoners confessed that they wanted to rob and end Johnny during that night in the woods, but they decided otherwise after noticing the presence of the big black dog accompanying him. What can you do in the presence of a ghost dog? Let's just say that it is better to never have an encounter with a ghost dog because, most often, there is nothing you can do to stop the creature if it is out to do you harm. There are ways to ward off the malevolent beings, but these tend to be vague. In regions dominated by the Christian faith, it is said that simply wearing a cross or having a picture of a saint would be enough to keep the black dog away. Other superstitions involve carrying a coffin nail, sprinkling fresh water on the ground behind you as you walk, or keeping a pair of iron scissors with you. In addition, it is said that you should avoid crossroads, moving bodies of water, such as rivers and streams, woods, or long stretches of field. Those restrictions would have made travel near impossible in the past. Story of something big that reflects at night. I was probably 15 or late 14 at the time, in midsummer. 2 of my friends and I left a girl's house late at night, basically sneaking out. She lived deep in the countryside, about a 45-minute walk away from the city line. My 2 friends and I left around 2 in the morning. We stepped out of her country subdivision road onto a main paved country road. We took a left onto the main road. We looked on our right, you could basically see just road and woods in each direction with some mailboxes. But on the right side, our opposite direction at the top or end of our view on the road, we could see just a white light or reflector, imagine. Obviously, we were just focused on not getting caught by cops or anything past curfew. We walked left in the opposite direction. As cars occasionally drove by, we would hide in the woods or along the tree line to ensure our safety in case one of them was a cop. Every time a car passed us in the opposite direction, we would look back and see the white object getting closer quickly. You could only see the object when the headlights were on. Once the headlights disappeared, it seemed to vanish completely. We continued walking, all seeing it, just confused but not caring to wait. We got to about the town line. This thing was probably only like 200 to 500 feet behind us again. We could only see it in passing headlights, none of the cars seemed to notice it. When the creature was close enough, it had translucent white skin with big black hole eyes, long limbs, looked pretty skinny but still could have been anywhere between 6 and 8, maybe more, feet tall. We get into the start of town with house subdivision streets, basically townhomes. At every 4-way intersection we approached on our left, we could see the creature walking at our pace on the opposite block street. When I got a side view of it, I noticed its arms hung down pretty low. It was like it was looking at us but wasn't. My friends and I were not under the influence of any substances that night, and we frequently ventured outside after dark, so our experience was not merely a result of fear or a misunderstanding. We were pretty, I guess, calm or casual because we kept our distance. We were about in town and more worried about ourselves getting caught by the law. To this day I still ride my bike around town at night, and I have for years. I haven't seen anything at night like that since or before. It couldn't have been just my vision, because both my friends also saw it, and they definitely observed it 3 more times without headlights at opposite four-way intersections. It was a gray, cloudy night. Any help with what I might have seen? Please explain. I have always been skeptical about paranormal and supernatural phenomena, often laughing at them and attempting to debunk paranormal videos. However, after what happened tonight, I am feeling troubled. I was up late playing some horror games and watching streamers play Phasmophobia after my 15th birthday. For context, I have always had this strange feeling in our kitchen as if someone were watching. Before it reached bedtime, I asked my grandmother if she could put a small blanket up in front of the kitchen entrance to block the view because the feeling was stronger tonight. I sleep on the sofa in the living room. A few hours later, the blanket got violently yanked down, even though it was hammered, and there was a heavy wind pressure running past it. It was cold at first, then turned boiling hot. I got goosebumps everywhere, even inside of my head. When I stood up to check, I saw that the table near the kitchen was slightly shaking, and at the same time, our basket with snacks was pushed off the table. It also yanked my water bottle off the table. My blanket flew across the room and landed near the TV. I saw a dark shadow moving on the kitchen floor. I immediately said, "Hell no," from my mouth and ran upstairs to tell my mom. While running upstairs, I felt something pulling at me from behind. It was just enough to make me stumble and panic even more. I also heard fast footsteps running towards me. Has anyone experienced anything like this? I just need an explanation here. I know it's silly, but I'm going to sleep in my mother's room tonight until I know what it is. I want to share some personal encounters I've had throughout my life. Hi everyone, this is my first time sharing here. I wanted to share some stories and encounters that I've had throughout my 22 years of life. The earliest ones are from when I was very little. We used to live with my aunt in her house before my current home was built. I was a toddler, and my mom said that I once came running from the hallway crying and pointing at the closet at the back end of the hallway, saying there was a girl with Kool-Aid all over her face inside. There was nothing in there, I just ended up leaving my mom super freaked out lol. Another encounter happened regularly when I was younger. There is a graveyard on the route to my current home, and my mother mentioned that I would occasionally wave as we passed by. Even weirder is that my little cousin did it years later, when my mom would drive by the same graveyard. The third encounter was when I was a bit older. I was in first grade. Anyways, I was doing my homework after dark. There's a window that's plastered right in the middle of my room. We lived in the country, where we had no nearby neighbors and no sources of light, so imagine how shocked my mom was when I walked up to her and told her I couldn't do my homework because a girl was staring at me through the window. She, of course, checked, and there was nobody there. Now on to the encounters I can actually remember. These all happened when I was a teenager, and for some reason they happened when I was home alone. The first teenage encounter was when my family was out visiting friends. I was walking from my restroom to my bedroom when I glanced down the hall that leads to the living room. My heart almost jumped out of my chest when I saw a pair of translucent legs standing there facing me. It was as if someone had been cut in half and their legs were just left standing there. They were wearing some sort of khaki-looking rugged material pants and dark-colored shoes, if I remember right. Anyways, I bolted into my bedroom and stayed in there for close to an hour. When I went out to check if anything was there, they were gone. The next teenage encounter happened not long after. I was home alone again. My family was once again visiting the same friends. They used to do that a lot, lol, and I thought they had gotten back because I heard my brother screaming. My little brother used to be extremely rowdy and would scream and screech a lot just to be loud. I go outside to check, and the front yard is absolutely empty. There's a giant rose bush to the right of the entrance of my house that obscures the view. From behind it, I began to hear heavy, crunching footsteps and this weird clicking sound, like someone was rapidly clicking their tongue. I slammed the door shut and locked it. Not entirely sure if that encounter counts as a ghost one, but it was definitely supernatural. The screaming sounded exactly like my brother, and it just cut off the moment I opened the front door. There were 2 other events, smaller but still creepy. There was the time when I thought I heard the front door being violently rattled when I was home alone again, and the time when I was home alone once more and heard scratching coming from my attic door. Those 2, I'm not entirely sure were ghosts either, but they were certainly not fun. My mom ended up selling the house, and I believe she blessed the property, I haven't had anything else weird happen at home since then. Sorry if my formatting and writing suck, writing isn't my strong suit at all. I hope y'all believe me and feel free to ask me absolutely anything about any of this, and I'll do my best to answer whatever you may want to know. 100% true personal experience. When I first moved into my house 4 years ago, we were renovating it, as it was an old school from the 1800s. It already sounds creepy as it is. My dad and I were rummaging through old stuff in a room, and above a movable and tall cabinet, about 5 feet off the floor, was a door with a small hallway-like corridor that led to some ladders. The corridor was about 4 feet wide and 4 feet tall. Since I was the smallest, my dad made me go and see where it led. The tiny corridor led to a bell tower that we found extremely scary because it dates back nearly 150 years and contains the names of students who attended the school, as we later discovered. My grandmother's sister and her husband used to work in the school in the 80s, which was a youth center back then, and when they were cleaning the place, they would put things down, and then they would find them missing or in other places. One day, while they were cleaning, they focused on a plaque that listed dates and names of successful students and fallen soldiers who had attended the school. However, when my great-uncle went to get more cleaning products, he returned to find that the plaque had gone missing and had not been seen in nearly 40 years. My dad and I did some further exploration, and we stumbled across a well in a series of tunnels that led underneath the house and only the house. The well was about 6 feet across and more than 50 feet deep but was covered with cobwebs and gave an eerie vibe when near it. We decided that we would block it another day, which we did. It's been 4 years since we moved in, and a variety of events have taken place in the house. One that baffles me is when I put my phone on charge and went to get it 2 hours later to find exactly 2 hours of conversation from when I left it. This was on Snapchat, and I was the only person in the house, and Snapchat only allows one user at a time, so I couldn't narrow it down to anything but the fact that either I was losing it or something weird was happening. I should note that the house is split directly down the middle, which leaves a symmetrical layout of each side of the house. In the middle of the night on the neighbor's side of the house, motion-detected lights activate throughout the hallways even when no one is moving, and in the children's playroom, a pressure-activated toy goes off at about 3 in the morning. Additionally, the vacuum cleaner turns on and continues running even after being unplugged for several minutes, with one instance lasting for hours. The creepiest event of all happened a few nights ago. We have an alarm on the door that sounds whenever it opens, and I was home alone, and I heard the sound go off as I went downstairs to check. The door was still locked, and the alarm was still activated, so I was confused, and I was adamant that I heard the alarm. After I checked the security cameras, I returned to my bedroom, and I heard somebody try the door handle to the front door, which sent shivers up my spine. I knew that the door was locked and the windows were closed, so I just went to bed and tried to ignore everything that happened. Throughout the night I kept on hearing doors opening and closing in my house, and the door handles on my bedroom door kept turning. Eventually I got fed up, and I was convinced I was going crazy, so I went downstairs from my mezzanine level and put my hand on the door handle, and when I tried to twist it, I felt like somebody was helping me from the other side, which sent me into panic mode. I flung the door open to find that there was nobody there, but all the lights were on inside the house when I had left them off, so I patrolled throughout the house to convince myself that there was nobody else here. The last thing I remember is walking down the hallway towards my bedroom when I heard what sounded like heavy running footsteps racing towards me, followed by total darkness until I woke up the next morning. My parents are convinced I'm losing my marbles, but all throughout my childhood up to the age of 17, I have seen weird, unexplainable, and supernatural things. When I was 5, we lived in a house in the middle of nowhere, and my bedroom was on the second floor, and my window was directly above a flight of stairs leading to the front door. The window cleaner had to come inside the house to clean my window from the inside, as the ladders had no base to stand on because of the stairs. I woke in the depth of the night, and I could not move anything apart from my head and my eyes, which were pointed directly towards the window, and for about 5 minutes, I wondered why I couldn't move as I was staring towards the stars until I saw a hand creep around the brickwork, and being 5, I didn't know what it was until the head of a man, which looked, I can only describe, like a dummy with a stitched mouth and buttons for eyes, looked directly at me. I suddenly regained all control of my body. I leapt out of bed and raced into my parents' bedroom and dived under the covers and burst into tears. My father asked me why I was crying, and I said there was a man outside my window. So being the hard nut he is, he grabbed the bat from the side of his bed and strolled into my bedroom to find my window is open, when it was closed, but no one was there. The dogs then jumped off the bed and raced down the stairs, so my dad followed the dogs down all guns blazing, shouting and demanding that whoever is here has 5 seconds to show themselves and leave, but he checked the entire house, and there wasn't a trace of anyone or anything. I should also state that my grandmother can see the ghost of her mother and sister. She believes that if she sees her mother, then someone will die soon, and if her sister appears, then someone will be injured. Her mother died, and she saw her mother 3 days before her sister died. She also, according to my mother, saw her mother 3 days in a row leading up to the 9/11 attacks. Usually, only family members are affected by these events, but that particular instance was an exception unless a distant family member was ended. She saw her sister the night before I snapped my clavicle bone playing rugby, which pierced my skin and was 5 centimeters away from puncturing my neck. I also had to sleep at my grandparents' house one night when my parents went to Scotland. I stayed up late with her, and I decided to go to bed. I said my goodbyes and walked toward the stairs to see what appeared to be my grandmother at the top. I was so confused as to how she had gotten there so fast, so I walked back into the living room to see that she was still watching TV. I told her that I had seen someone at the top of the stairs, so she shot up and raced to the stairs, and her jaw dropped and eyes opened wider than anything I'd seen before. I watched in fear as she looked as if she were possessed, but she was talking to whatever was at the top of the stairs, calling it mother, so I guess she can see her mom. I nearly left some stains on my pants when my granddad grabbed me and moved me away and explained to me what was happening, but as I was young, I didn't understand until I remembered last year and asked them about that night. My grandma had no idea, to this day, until my granddad explained it to her. A week after that night, my uncle passed away from a sudden heart failure. I was walking home one night from a friend's house in York, UK. As I reached a bridge over some train tracks, I turned the corner and saw what I can only describe as a kaleidoscopic swirl of patterns in front of me. The closest thing I could describe it as is the patterns that appear when you rub your eyes. It was in the shape of a dog, a German Shepherd. It wasn't solid like a projection, but as I moved closer, it remained in the same place on the path in front of me. I stopped next to it and moved my head around, and it was three-dimensional. I could see through to the floor at parts, but the form was unmistakable as a dog. After a few seconds, I went to reach out towards it, and the dog barked, not with sound, but moved like it did bark. It then dissolved, the previous 3D structure broke down, and then it was gone. The next morning, I received a call from my mother to tell me our family dog, Kyle, a German Shepherd who I grew up with, died in the night. A woman and a shadow figure visited me while I was recovering from surgery. I just had surgery on Monday, and I am out of work for the next 3 weeks. I believe I have always been sensitive since a young age. Before surgery, people would ask if I was nervous about surgery, and I'd honestly tell them that I was calm. I trust my doctor, and I'm at peace if something happens and I die. I told them I was only nervous about becoming a super psychic and not getting any sleep for the rest of my life because I have ghosts visiting me while I'm sleeping. People would laugh and say, "That's so me," and we all went on with our days. Well, as soon as I came home, I felt like there were so many spirits in my room. I even saw a shadow person in the corner of my room, which isn't an uncommon occurrence. Knowing that I was just coming out from anesthesia and I was pretty drugged up, I didn't necessarily believe what I was seeing. I keep seeing a woman whose face is obscured, and she is wearing clothes from the late 1940s or early 1950s, walking in and out of my room. I just associated this with me being drugged up. At night, I'd be visited by the shadow person and not get a lot of sleep, and during the day it was this woman, and somehow I was able to get some sleep. Well, I didn't believe these could be real until one afternoon I was by myself for an hour while my caretaker had to go into work and finish up some things. I was napping on my bed, and my cat was sleeping on my legs. I heard what sounded like someone opening kitchen cabinet doors and heard noises of things moving in the living room, and I'm thinking my sister has come back from work. I heard a swishing, shuffling, walking sound down the hallway and saw the woman in the 40s/50s dress go straight into my sister's room. My cat's head shot up, and he just stared into her room for the longest time. I saw his ears perk up and move when we heard what sounded like her dresser drawers opening and closing. Then my cat relaxed after we stopped hearing anything, and I did too. I texted my sister, and she had a mild panic attack because she couldn't remember locking the front door after she left. She rushed home to make sure someone wasn't actually in the house. She didn't find anything in the house, so we discussed the possible causes of the noise. She was nervous because she knew of my abilities, but I always reassured her that I could take care of the house and make it a safe place even with visiting spirits. And I always have. But since I'm recovering and not totally mentally here because of the drugs, I know I'm not as strong, and I'm definitely in a weakened state to fight off negative spirits. The following day, my mother remains with me to allow my sister to attend work. I am not supposed to lift anything weighing 2 pounds or more, so my hands are currently limited in their ability to assist. I recall simply resting in the living room while my mother worked from home in our office. I saw the woman walk by me into the kitchen, and she disappeared. I never get a threatening feeling from her, and honestly, I feel quite safe when I see her. At this moment, I get a text message from my boyfriend while he's at work. For some reason, when he has a ghost experience, I am having something simultaneously. Usually, these are much darker spirit experiences. He told me he was on his forklift and saw something in the shape of a human above him, but he didn't give off real human vibes. The figure was clinging to the ceiling before it disappeared. Throughout that day, whenever he saw this thing that was always staring at him threateningly, I consistently felt the presence of the woman nearby. I wonder now if this woman is my protector while I'm going through my surgery in my weakened state. I feel very blessed now to see her, and I'm not scared. My cat doesn't seem to be nervous either. I haven't seen the shadow person much since I've seen an increase in her. My sister now jokes whenever I tell her that I see the woman. If I see her go into the kitchen, my sister says, "Oh, she's telling me I need to do the dishes. It's filthy in there." Yesterday, I saw my bedroom curtain move as if someone had walked by it, and I heard a strange sound. My sister then recreated that sound but accidentally stubbed her toe on the stepladder I've been using to get into bed, which made the exact noise I had heard. She said, "Well, I guess even ghosts can stub their toes when they come to check in on you." I don't know why I'm telling this story, but I guess I'm curious if other people who have had surgery have increased paranormal activity. Creepy sighting. I live in a semi-rural area in Oklahoma, and the area behind my grandparents' house is basically a small forest. When I smoke late at night, I sometimes walk to the fence and hop it, and walk to the gas station. One time I was halfway there, and I heard a rustling, so I looked into the direction in which it came from and saw about a 6-foot-long, furless, white, skinny creature run across the path/flat area. And no, I had not smoked that night, and I had slept 8 hours the night before that. I would like to know if the creature could be a crawler or something else. Northfield Road, Worcester, 1980s incident. When I was around 4 or 5 years old, I lived with my mum in a Victorian terrace house on Northfield Street in Worcester. At that age, I used to play a game where I'd pretend the layout of our home was like a lift system. I'd walk from the living room through a door into a small hallway, close it behind me, and imagine I was traveling up or down to another floor. Then I'd open the next door and step into the dining room, believing I'd arrived somewhere new. I'd do this routine back and forth, enjoying the feeling of shifting between imaginary levels of the house. One afternoon while playing this game, I stepped into the dining room and heard footsteps on the stairs. I immediately froze. My mum was in the living room, and we were the only ones in the house. I looked towards the hallway where the stairs began. A door at the base of the stairs slowly opened, and a figure emerged. It wasn't hazy or vague, it was solid. Tall. Human-shaped. Completely wrapped in bandages from head to toe. At my age, I had no real understanding of ghosts or intruders. But what I did know about was mummies from storybooks and cartoons, and that's what I thought I was seeing. A mummy. Something out of place and impossible. The moment the figure saw me, it froze in shock, just like I had. For a split second, we both stood there staring at each other. And then it took a step toward me. That's when I ran. I bolted through the hallway door, back into the living room, crying and terrified. I hid behind my mum on the sofa, sobbing and telling her not to go in there because there was a man in the house. My mum immediately went to check, suspecting a possible break-in. She found nothing. The dining room was empty. The back door was locked. But the door at the bottom of the stairs, the one that was always kept closed with a high metal latch I couldn't reach, was standing open. That house always made me feel uneasy while we lived there. My mum thought it might have been my age or just the environment, but whatever it was, that feeling disappeared after we moved. I only learned years later that when my parents first moved in, there was a corn doll hanging from the ceiling in the cellar. They left it there. Corn dolls were traditionally used to ward off evil spirits. Maybe it meant something. Maybe it didn't. All I know is what I experienced. I don't believe in the supernatural. I'm an atheist. I believe in science, logic, and evidence. But I saw something that day, and it saw me. I've spent decades trying to explain it, but I can't. Maybe it was a time slip. Maybe I caught a glitch in reality. Maybe something from another moment bumped into me by accident. But it wasn't imagination. I saw it. I remember it. And even now, all these years later, I still get goosebumps when I think about it. This may be a little long-winded, but I'll try to keep it as brief as possible so as not to bore anybody. However, this is something I just need to get off my chest. I'll start by saying I'm a skeptic when it comes to practically anything supernatural. I fully believe there's a natural explanation for things that seem unexplainable. Even now. The problem is I just can't seem to think of a logical explanation, not that there isn't one, so I'd like other people to hear it, and maybe someone can come up with a rational explanation. I live in the UK, and it's currently 4:58 a.m. I just can't sleep thinking about it. So this past weekend, a couple of friends and I had decided to venture into some local woodland like we had done a few years prior. Life had gotten in the way, but we were all free this past weekend, so we decided to do it again for old time's sake. The plan was like usual. Head into the woods, get a fire going, have some beers, have a laugh with no distractions, and camp until daylight. Head home. Since the woodland was within walking distance, we headed into the trees. I'm the most experienced in the outdoors and was carrying all the camping gear, axe, knife, cooking tools, etc. Another pal who's strong as an ox was carrying all the beers, and my other buddy was just carrying a backpack of snacks and barbecue food. In summary, I am familiar with this stretch of woodland, and I had previously camped at a specific location during COVID that I planned to take us all to. I'd found an old wheelbarrow and turned it into an awesome little makeshift fire pit and wanted to get it going again. However, even though I'd followed my previous path, I couldn't seem to find my last little camp spot. It wasn't just the wheelbarrow I was looking for, there is a distinctive Y-shaped tree and patch of clear flat ground in front of it. Pretty unusual in a woodland full of bushes. Anyway, after a while I gave up. It was getting to nearly 6 p.m., so we didn't have loads of daylight left, and I wanted us to set up camp and get some wood cut before we hunkered down. We found a reasonable spot, nothing like my last campsite, but it would do. Got the fire going and cracked the beers. The night rolled in. We had agreed to keep off our phones but kept them switched on just in case of emergencies. However, phone reception was practically non-existent. At around 11 p.m. or so, we had a decision to make. Camp or go home. I was happy to stay, and so was my other pal, the beer carrier we'll call him, but my other mate wanted to head home. He didn't fancy roughing it by a fire. Fair enough. I agreed to navigate him out of the woods and come back to my other friend, whom I'd told to just keep the fire roaring so it'd be easier for me to get back. Off we went. It took us a while, but I managed to get us out of the woods, granted a little ways from where we entered, but enough for my friend to go alone, as he could see the road. Now I just had to turn back and go back to my friend by the fire. As I was walking back, I figured I was maybe halfway back. I couldn't see any flickering of a fire, but I heard a male voice make a sort of beckoning sound over to my left. It kind of sounded like my friend by the fire but not 100% sure enough. I heard it again. Something told me not to shout back, the voice didn't seem right. I wanted to just get back to my friend by the fire, but at the same time, what if he got nervous being alone and he tried to follow us out and got lost? I kept pushing forward towards where I knew our fire was, every now and again turning off my headlight just looking for the flickers of the fire in the distance. Sure enough, I managed to see the faint flickers of fire and my friend's torch beaming toward me. His massive frame soon came into view, and he just said my name with an obvious distress in his voice. I said, "Yeah, it's me. Were you just shouting?" By this point we're both by the fire, and I can see he's shaken up. He said he wasn't shouting, but he thought he heard someone laughing. Strangely enough, the laughter seemed to come from roughly the same direction as the half-beckoning shout I heard earlier. I just told him to relax. We've got an axe, a knife/machete. He's built like a tank, and I'm 6'1" and fairly broad. Nobody is going to mess with us on purpose, surely. It's likely just the wind. The mind plays tricks on you. Just as we were about to crack open some fresh beers, we heard a loud metallic clang. Same direction. We both bolted up. He had his knife, I had a hand axe, and we both just froze, looking at each other. Now it was obvious. That wasn't wind. We decided enough was enough and filled our backpacks with everything of value. Once we were sure we had everything, we doused the fire and started heading out. I decided the best way would be to go the way I just came from. A bit further from our initial entry point, but I've just come from that direction, so it'll be easy. Even in the pitch dark. So we're heading back the way I literally just came from, perhaps 10 minutes before. Then it was just there. The wheelbarrow I had used years before during COVID. Same rusty hole near the bottom corner. Inside was charred black with the fire I'd had roaring over 4 years ago. My friend didn't react because he hadn't been this way yet. I'd been looking for this wheelbarrow, so I definitely would have noticed it before, and it was definitely not the campsite I'd been at prior. Then I noticed a black glove just below the wheelbarrow. Looked almost new and had rubber fingertips just like my friends who had escorted out no more than 30 minutes ago at this point. None of us touched the glove, we just marched now. My original path out didn't matter, I was just straight line booking it until we got to a clearing. As the trees thinned, we heard an almighty metal bang behind us, and I admit we both ran. It sounded like a sledgehammer smashing against something metal. We got to a field and didn't bother finding the exit, we just climbed the fence. Neither of us is small or super athletic, so this really wasn't something we'd choose to do usually. We found ourselves practically on the other side of the woods that we'd entered. We just headed to the nearest streetlight, and none of us really knew what to say. It was obvious we were both shaken up. I've camped alone loads of times, I'm used to funny noises and your mind playing tricks. This wasn't that. Not only that, these woods aren't exactly popular. You never see litter, there are no actual paths or dog walking trails through there. In fact, the only foreign item I've ever seen there in over 10 years is that wheelbarrow. The first thing I did was call my friend who had escorted out originally. Now he was not experienced in the woods. He didn't even have his own headlamp or torch, he'd been using my torch, flashlight for Americans, before. The likelihood of him playing a prank was non-existent, but I called him anyway. He was at home, I could hear his girlfriend even talking in the background. When I told him what happened, he couldn't believe it. He asked me if I picked them up, and I said, "What?" He said, "My gloves." He'd accidentally left them at our camp when I escorted him out, but just figured we'd grab them in the morning. I've been meaning to go back and see if the wheelbarrow is there in the daylight, but something just feels off. Even writing this, it feels like something was seriously wrong with that whole ordeal. My friend who experienced it with me is equally as troubled by it. How did that wheelbarrow appear in a path I just was on? How did my friend's glove get there? Who was making the noises and why? If it were people playing tricks, how were they moving about in the dark with no light? A creepy moment at the cemetery. My dad passed away a couple of years ago after a long and painful battle with cancer. I haven't had a single day since his passing where I haven't missed him or thought about the anguish he went through. I developed a habit of visiting his grave quite often, be it day or night, rain or sunshine. The cemetery he's buried in is quite old and rundown. It has 4 generations of my forefathers resting there and lies a few miles from my dad's farm. It's not the most scenic place once you're inside, but it's surrounded by farmland on all sides except for the road leading up to it. This one time, while I was sitting by his grave, I heard what sounded like a little girl softly humming a tune a few feet behind me. The melody was strangely beautiful, almost like something a trained vocalist would sing. I ignored it at first, but then realized that I had been completely alone when I entered the cemetery, which is surrounded by nothing but open fields. Yet the voice sounded close, as if someone were right behind me. The moment I turned around, the humming stopped instantly. Thinking nothing of it, I faced my dad's grave again, feeling all the love I always do for him. But within a few seconds, the same gentle tune started up again. This time I turned around immediately, only to see no one there. Again, the sound cut off the exact second I began to move my head to look behind me. I turned back toward his headstone, only for the melody to return a third time just moments later and then stop, almost like someone had hit a pause button, as soon as I tried to seek the source. That third time unsettled me a little and gave me the chills. I kissed my dad's headstone, said my goodbye, and decided to head back to my car. As I walked out, I noticed a small cluster of tiny graves under a tree. Their size suggested they belonged to children. These graves, 3 or 4 of them, would have been directly behind me while I faced my dad's grave, completely hidden from view because of the tree's branches. I do believe in the afterlife, but I'm not sure whether I believe in ghosts. I'm also not someone who scares easily from supposed supernatural encounters. I've always taken paranormal stories as harmless entertainment that usually have a logical explanation once you think about them. But in this instance, I honestly couldn't come up with any explanation at all. I've had experiences before that I can't explain, but this was the scariest. Since I was a kid, I have been interested in ghosts and related topics, watching all the ghost adventures and even trying to determine if my house is haunted. It isn't, thankfully. But when I turned 19, I noticed more things happening that I couldn't explain, and it seemed to me like something was following me. They stopped after a year or so, as I am now 21, but the experience that sticks out to me the most was a night my friends and I all gathered at one of my homies' houses. We all normally hung out in his room, which is kind of below the rest of the house but still on ground level. This was mainly because he had a side yard area where we could hang out and smoke. But one night while a couple of us and I were hanging out on his patio, we heard knocking at the door. This wasn't unusual, and we invited other people to come over, so I got up and walked through his room and closed the door behind me to see who was there. But there wasn't anyone at the door, And, to my surprise, the front door wasn't the one that was being knocked on. It was his garage door, which is to the left of his front door. However, no one was home except for us. His parents were in the mountains for the weekend, and all of his animals were in the room with me, watching as the door shook violently without anyone knocking on it. The door also had a dog door on it that was swinging back and forth in a way that was totally unnatural and couldn't have been caused by the door shaking, as it was swinging back and forth in a different rhythm than the door. I looked through the dog door as it swung back and forth, but nothing was on the other side. I stared at the door until it stopped, which took about 45 seconds. 5 seconds later, I was still standing there trying to figure out what had just happened. I heard one of the most chilling things I've ever heard. It was a growl that was so low it couldn't have been his dog, which was right next to me, and it came from underneath his staircase, which is just next to the garage door. In a panic, I immediately ran back to where my friends were hanging out and told them everything. Soon after, my friend who lived there told me his parents had seen cupboards open on their own and heard strange things as well. The thing that validates this to me as something supernatural, though, is that everyone else there heard the door knocking. And the other strange thing was that this kid's dog barks at anything, and I mean anything. But it didn't even bark once at the shaking door. But yeah, it's some super sketchy shit, and it's going to be hard for me to sleep there ever again, lol. I 100% believe that there was something supernatural going on within my childhood home. A small summary of some of the ongoing. When I was about 16, I was watching Grave Encounters with my friend and aunt. Now, horror films tend to frighten my aunt significantly, so she usually prefers to watch them with the lights on. However, I managed to persuade her to watch it with the lights off. Not long into the movie, we hear a bang, like all the oven trays have fallen from the side in the kitchen. We ignored it and continued watching our film. We thought nothing of it considering there were others in the house. About 10 minutes later, we paused the film to get a drink from the kitchen. I walk in, and the trays are indeed on the floor. Except they're not scattered about as if they fell. They are in a dead straight line, one next to another in the middle of the floor, down the middle of the long, narrow kitchen. Obviously we're all beginning to get a little freaked out. There were 2 children sleeping upstairs who hadn't moved, and my mom and uncle were in the room next to us, and they both swore they hadn't been in the kitchen. They thought we had knocked some trays over when they heard the noise earlier. I 100% believe that it was supernatural. My uncle can be a bit of a prankster, but he would have been too proud of himself not to have taken credit. This incident was just one of the many strange occurrences in that house. We heard children's voices when no one was home, saw objects move without explanation, and heard music that did not exist. Occasionally you could feel a presence as well as the dog randomly going mental, staring, and becoming protective at random empty spots in a room. A random prayer was written on the wall of the rickety old shed at the bottom of the garden, and it never deteriorated over the 14 years we lived there. However, whatever it was never seemed to pose a threat or danger. It felt as if it enjoyed startling us at times or giving us a little scare, but perhaps it was simply trying to communicate its presence. Strange night. For some context, I am a skeptic, my girlfriend is a non-believer, and the 3 friends in the story are all total believers. One night, my girlfriend and I were hanging out, and we decided to visit one of the nearby parks with a playset after dark because we thought it would be creepy and fun. Anyway, we decided to stop by my friend's house to see if he and his boyfriend would like to join us. We drive down to their place, get out of the car, and start walking down their kind of long and very dark driveway. We didn't text before we got there, I just figured we would show up and ask because it's quite common to just drop in there unannounced, and as soon as we get halfway down the driveway, we smell this absolutely terrible smell. It smelled like something had been rotting for days, or like a compost bin during the hot summer, so it was a super bad smell, and we both noticed and commented on how bad it was. As we get closer to the house, the smell starts to go away, but it's still in the air. Normally my friends are outside, except when we go up to their shed. They aren't out there, so I figure they might be inside, so I go to knock on the door. I'm immediately a bit creeped out because they are always outside doing something at almost all hours, but whatever, it's fine. After I knock, I hear movement inside and someone saying, SHH. And then just silence. I wait a few seconds and then knock again. That's when my girlfriend says, "Did you hear that?" I thought she was talking about them inside, but she was facing the forest surrounding the house, and that's when I started getting a bit spooked. After another knock, one of my other friends, whom I did not expect to be there, answered the door. He pulled me and my girlfriend in and asked me how long I was out there and why I was here. I told him everything and that we just got there. Then my friend, the one who I had gone there to see, we will call him L, and his boyfriend A, and the other friend will be S, pulls me aside and asks me if I smelled anything or heard anything in the woods. Again I told him the truth and what my girlfriend heard, and he says, okay, you should probably leave, like, now. He then explains what had happened to them. They were all sitting in their shed smoking weed. Their shed is a huge tent, and then they heard something moving around them. It was totally common, they lived in the woods, but when they started smelling awful rotting meat, they got a bit disturbed. They left the shed and shone their lights around but couldn't see anything, just heard rustling and smelled awful rot. So they sit back down when they all, very unfazed people who regularly don't get scared much at all, start feeling this awful sense of terror and dread. Another huge rustle in the trees finally made them get up and sprint inside the house. A few moments later, they heard a knock on the door, and it was me. L and A also explained how weird shit has been happening to them all week. Weird noises, strange animal sounds far off in the distance, which I now know means it is closer, and seeing some animals acting very strange around where they live. I was still very skeptical of the whole thing and joked around, saying, what, is this place some kind of Skinwalker Ranch deal now? And everyone looks at me, because until that point, I didn't know about the name deal. Then everyone starts to feel a bit of that sense of fear. After about 10 minutes, I managed to convince my girlfriend, L, and S to come to the park, while A stays home. We get to the park, and nothing strange happens. We hear noises, but I see a few raccoons and chalk it up to the trash pandas having a bit of a party. I drive them home, and everything is fine. We say goodbye, and by that point, we have all mostly moved on and agreed that we were just being irrational. Now I drive my girlfriend home. Where we live, it's all forests, so yay for us. The drive is pretty normal, nothing super strange until we get to this one pretty quiet street. I'm driving a bit slow because it's a dangerous road with lots of blind corners, and at one of the houses I see what looks like a person standing up on their deck, looking at the siding of their house from inches away. WTF. My girlfriend and I both freak out as we instantly feel that awful feeling of terror and dread. My heart is racing, and I speed up and get her home. I call L and tell him what happened. He tells me to wait and just check it out again on my way past. Okay, so I check it out again. Same position. No lights on, just my headlights, and that feeling of terror. I tell him what I see, and he tells me to get the duck out of there, so I speed home, and at night I feel that sense of terror. Ever since that day I have heard things in the woods, seen weird things, and felt that awful feeling. Sometimes I smell the scent too. I have always chalked it up to coincidence and just general weird things, but I can't help but think, what if? Was it a werewolf? I live in Shimla, Himachal Pradesh, India. Last year, I went through the most terrifying experience of my life, my first and, thankfully, only personal encounter with something completely unexplainable. Nothing like it has happened before or since. It all began when I planned a trek to Shali Tibba with two of my cousins, Harish and Abhimanyu. For those who don't know, Shali Tibba is about 48 kilometers from Shimla, perched high up in the mountains. The trek starts from Kotnal village, and the summit houses the Shali Mata temple. I had done this trek before, so I was familiar with the route. Usually, it takes about an hour to an hour and a half to drive from Shimla to Kotnal. That day, we left Shimla around 5 in the evening in Harish's car. Are you sure this is the right way? The road looks unfamiliar, Abhimanyu asked, peering uncertainly through the fogged-up window. I've come this way before, I answered, trying to sound confident, though I already felt uneasy. But soon, the road became confusing. There were barely any signboards, and the darkness didn't help. Uday, I think we missed a turn somewhere, Harish said, slowing the car. Damn, it's getting late. Let me check GPS on my phone, I said, opening my map app. After several frustrating attempts, we discovered the signal was patchy, leaving us completely lost. Let's stop somewhere and ask for directions. Hopefully, we find a chaiwala, Abhimanyu suggested. We found a small roadside shop, bought some snacks, and got our bearings again. But this delay made a trip that normally took only about 1.5 hours stretch painfully to nearly 4 hours. By the time we finally reached Kotnal village and parked the car, it was 10:30 p.m. We seriously lost half the day, Harish sighed, stretching his legs. We'd better start the trek soon, I said, pulling my jacket tighter. I led our little group, trusting my memory of the trail. It was December, bitterly cold, with hardly any moonlight. Thick fog loomed over the mountains, making the path nearly invisible. All right guys, switch on your phone flashlights and keep close, I instructed. Abhimanyu clicked on his phone flashlight, then Harish did the same. I switched on the big torch as well. The cold was biting, cutting through us like needles. As we climbed higher, the air thinned, and the tiring uphill walk made each step heavier. We should stop and take a breather, I suggested after about 40 minutes. Yeah, my legs feel like lead, Harish admitted, leaning next to a tree. We paused every 10 to 15 minutes, catching our breath and trying not to think about how far we still had to go. The night was otherwise still, no strange noises, no eerie feelings, until we neared the halfway point, where a small rain shelter sat quietly. Suddenly, I felt like my legs had grown incredibly heavy, as if weighed down by 1,000 kilos. I stopped, dropping my backpack. Guys, I don't know what's happening, but my legs feel like stone, I said, wobbling. Abhimanyu swayed and said, me too. It's like I can't lift my feet properly. Maybe we're just exhausted. Harish guessed, rubbing his calves. Or, is it something else? I whispered, uneasy. We reached the rain shelter, just a small tin sheet hut built for trekkers to take cover from the rain. It's freezing inside, Harish said, rubbing his hands together. We collected some dry wood and struck a small fire to keep warm. It's past midnight, guys. I don't think we can make it to the temple tonight, I said, trying to sound hopeful. Let's warm up, eat something, and rest for a bit, Abhimanyu suggested. We unpacked a pan and disposable plates. I boiled some water and made Maggi noodles. Finally, some hot food, Harish said gratefully, taking a big bite. We ate silently, drained from the cold and the trek. When we finished, I said, let's rest for 10 minutes before moving on. Within minutes, both Harish and Abhimanyu had dozed off. But I wasn't sleepy. The fear and adrenaline kept me awake. I checked my phone for network, surprised to find a strong signal. Scrolling through Instagram memes to pass time, I started to relax. Then, suddenly, I heard a sound, a clawed scraping against the tin walls. I froze. Harish. Abhi. Did you guys hear that? I whispered, shaking Harish's arm gently. What is it? I can't wake up now, he mumbled groggily. The scratching grew louder. It moved slowly along the side of the shelter, sharp and chilling. I whispered to myself, maybe it's a leopard or bear. I remembered from documentaries that leopards usually avoid humans. But bears? They can be very dangerous, I thought nervously. Suddenly, the scratching stopped. Then it resumed near the open entrance where the fire was flickering faintly. I peered in the dim light. At first, I thought I saw a dog's nose. But soon, I realized the animal was enormous. It looked like a wolf, but this one was completely black. Its mouth was wider than any dog's I've seen. It was nearly twice the size of a regular dog. My breath caught. I was sweating despite the cold. My heart's pounding like crazy, I muttered, shaking Harish and Abhimanyu lightly, desperate to wake them. But they didn't stir. I couldn't stand, my legs trembled uncontrollably. Then, our eyes locked, the wolf's eyes and mine. Time seemed to freeze. For what felt like a lifetime, maybe 20 seconds or more, we held that gaze. Images from my past flashed before me in a split second. The wolf bared its enormous, blood-stained teeth. I felt frozen by fear, as if the end were near. But then, just as suddenly, without attacking, the wolf slowly turned and walked away. Harish grunted awake. Uday, what? What was that? He asked, rubbing his eyes. I don't know, but it was huge, a wolf like no other, I gasped. Abhimanyu sat up too, eyes wide. I saw it leaving, he said, his voice low. None of us spoke after that, sitting in stunned silence. You think it's dangerous? Should we move? Harish asked nervously. I took a deep breath. I want to see where it's gone, I said, summoning every ounce of courage. I quietly stood up and shone the torch into the dark beyond the shelter. Then, I saw something even more shocking. A man, completely naked, was standing not far from the shelter. I blinked hard, trying to focus. For 2 seconds, we stared at each other. Then he vanished into the shadows beyond the light's reach. Did you see that? I whispered, barely able to believe it. Harish spoke trembling, a naked man, out here, at this hour? We can't stay here, Abhimanyu said quickly. Let's get to the temple as fast as we can, I urged, my voice shaking. Our adrenaline kicked in. The usual 2-hour trek took us less than 30 minutes. As we ran, growls and barking sounded in the forest around us. I whispered, ignore it. Just keep moving. Finally, around 1:30 a.m., we reached the Shalimata temple. Inside the shrine, we bowed our heads in silent thanks. Thank you for protecting us, I said quietly. We then rested in the nearby rest house. None of us slept well that night. The next morning, over tea, we finally spoke about what happened in detail. I saw the wolf arrive, I told them. And I saw it leave, Harish added. And that naked man. I don't think I'll ever forget, Abhimanyu said softly. Later, when we told the temple priest about our experience, he was skeptical. Shali Tibba is not a haunted place. Such things don't happen here, he said firmly. But after pressing him, he said slowly, maybe that creature was neither animal nor man. Possibly a yaksha, a kind of supernatural being that protects the forest or wards off evil. Hearing that brought us some comfort, though none of us were entirely convinced. As we left the temple before noon, we passed by the shelter again. There on the ground lay the almost fully eaten body of a leopard, with only the skull clearly visible. We wanted to take a photo, but for some unknown reason, all our mobile phones and power bank had completely drained. That's strange, Harish remarked, puzzled. We never spoke about that night again. Even now, whenever we meet, we avoid that topic. What exactly happened? Was it a wolf? A man? A yaksha? Or something else that defies explanation? That night felt like a journey into another realm, an experience I hope to never repeat. I hope I never have again. Sleep paralysis or supernatural encounter? This morning, I awoke early and, feeling still fatigued, attempted to return to sleep. Only then did I wake up in a paralyzed state. I could see. I could hear. But I couldn't move. I saw my brother sitting at the foot of my bed and tried to ask him to move. But he was fully dressed and playing his Xbox. Somewhere between 4 and 4:45 a.m. I know this because I went to sleep around 3, and the paralysis seemed to last 20 minutes. I don't know how I managed to keep track of the time, not gonna lie. But anyways, him playing this early isn't unusual, but he never sits on my bed. I even felt the bed way down where he sat. It seemed to have been seconds before I tried to move my hand off my chest. It seemed to weigh 100 pounds. I did this because I heard that if you wake up and feel paralyzed, it's a demon sitting on you, and if you move, then it breaks the spell, or whatever you'd call it. The first time I tried, I managed to wiggle my fingers. This didn't work. The second time, I managed to lift my hand slightly off my chest. The next thing I know, I'm waking up. It's around 5 a.m. My laptop is on, and the video I had playing has ended. Now I have it set to go into sleep after 30 minutes of inactivity. I guess this is how I got an estimate of when it all happened. Anyways, it was pretty creepy, and I felt I should share. Supernatural encounter. I'm interested in hearing people's opinions on an experience I had nearly 3 years ago. The entire event unfolded in a single day during a road trip with my mom from Las Vegas to Lake Tahoe, and that morning began with a remarkable incident for me. I awoke and began to cry because I had the most vivid dream about my grandfather. It felt incredibly real. I have had dreams about him before, but nothing affected me quite like this one did. I talked to my mom about it, and she said it was crazy because my aunt had apparently had one just a day or two prior. This was news to me. It was extremely comforting and put me in a sentimental mood that day. So fast forward to midday, and we're driving in the middle of nowhere after we'd left Vegas, and my mom kept showing me stuff on her phone. There was no one out on the road with us, and it was clear skies. While she was distracting me while I was driving, I had this overwhelming sense that something bad was going to happen if I kept looking away from the road. I told her I needed it to be quiet and to stop distracting me because I was very anxious, and she just poked fun at me about how there's no one out there and we're fine. I unfortunately can get distracted easily, so this was out of character for me. For about 2 to 3 minutes it was like a voice, my own, kept telling me, when it happens, tap your brakes and pull to the right side of the road. Just over and over again my brain kept telling me, tap your brakes and go to the right. I really didn't like this, it just kept building, and finally I saw 3 cars headed our way. The feeling inside me got really intense at this point, and I sat up straight, thinking something was about to happen. The 3 cars were driving bumper to bumper because the one in front must have been going too slow for the other drivers. As soon as we are about nose to nose passing the first car, the third car decides to pass. It all happened so fast, but before it even happened, I knew it was about to, and I hit my brakes and pulled to the right at the same time the third car went into our lane. My mom screamed and covered her face, thinking we were tones. But because I had broken and pulled off, I didn't stop the car. I was going 70 miles per hour. All I did was swerve to the right. We were okay. When she brought her hands down from her face, she started crying because she was so shaken up. I mean, we were insanely close to death. Had I not seen it in time or reacted when I did, we definitely would have died. It was insane, and I've never had something like that happen before. It put me in great spirits. Because of earlier that morning, I was convinced it was my grandpa watching over and protecting me. Now fast forward even more to late at night as we're about an hour and a half away from our hotel at Lake Tahoe, and we get rerouted due to construction. It was extremely frustrating and illogical because the route maps directed us onto a random 10-mile gravel road, still in the middle of nowhere. We were so far away from light pollution that we decided to pull the car over and take photos of the stars. It was insanely beautiful, and it was so clear I could see color in the galaxy. After stargazing and taking photos for about 5 minutes, we decided to get back in the car and continue our drive because my mom was getting spooked. As we're driving off, I get this strong sense again. This time it was a feeling telling me I should stop the car and take more photos. Weird, I know. So I tell my mom, I'm going to stop again, I have a feeling I'm going to get a really cool photo. She wasn't a fan but was okay with it. This time I didn't get out of the car. Instead, I turned the car off, including the lights, and put my hand out my window to take more photos. I had just been taking photos before, and my phone had no problem, but this time my camera wouldn't work. I was getting frustrated, so I took a photo of my lap to see if it would work, and sure enough, it did. I started getting this eerie feeling, and I tested my camera about 5 more times. Every time I directed my phone outside, the camera roll failed to display the photo, whereas it consistently worked when aimed at my lap. I was feeling uneasy, so I asked my mom to watch and told her, I think something isn't right, something's happening again. She laughed it off, but I insisted that I was serious and asked her to watch so I could demonstrate what my phone was doing. At that time, I was using an iPhone with the nighttime resolution set to the maximum, which caused the photo to load for about 3 seconds before it was actually captured. So I aim my camera with my arm out my window and shoot. I turn back to my mom to make sure she's watching, and she looks puzzled and starts saying multiple times, "What is that?" She becomes increasingly loud, screaming that we need to drive away immediately while urging me to leave right now. I was frozen because I was already in a weird headspace from the whole day, but this was so terrifying for me. I knew something was happening, but I couldn't bring myself to look. I was genuinely worried that I might have a heart attack or freeze, which would prevent me from starting the car and driving due to fear, putting both my mom and me in danger. I kept my eyes on my mom in the passenger seat while I pulled my arm back in through the window, started the car, and sped off on the gravel. It wasn't until I'd been driving for maybe 30 seconds that I looked in the rearview mirror so that maybe I could see what my mom saw. But I saw nothing. My mom was shaking so bad, and so was I, to be honest. I asked her what she saw, and she started crying, saying I was going to think she was crazy. I had to beg her for a few minutes to get it out. She finally told me what she saw was a white light abstract outline of a human figure walk up to the window and reach out what looked like a hand to mine. She said when she was saying, "What is that?" The being turned its head towards her while it looked like it was grabbing her. Now, I didn't feel anything physical, but in a different sense, I definitely knew something was happening. As she's telling me all of this, I swear the photos that weren't working earlier started uploading on my camera roll, including a partial view of the white light being. It's partial because, based on where my phone was and where it was standing, it would make sense that it caught just a part of it. But the photo was precisely what my mom described, and I lost it. We both cried because it was so scary and trippy, and we didn't know how to process it. I still have the photo. My mother and I continue to discuss this experience to this day, and I have shared the photo with many others, none of whom have been able to provide an explanation for the figure of white light. Does anyone have any ideas of what it could have been? Or has anyone witnessed something similar? I know that this all sounds very crazy, but it's true, and we're both still so confused about what it was. We've even talked about going back one day, but I'm uncertain if that's a good idea. Supernatural account, the shadowy figure of my father at my bedroom door. This has happened for a while now, and it happens often, but, after listening to some stories, I decided to tell my own supernatural experience. In my family, spiritualism was very common, especially among my relatives who lived in the countryside. Taking this aspect into account, my mother always said that I have a side towards spiritualism, a kind of third eye, let's say. At the time, my father worked the night shift, so he always got home around 3 a.m. That particular night I remember opening my eyes and seeing my father staring at me in the doorway. I asked him, "What's up, Dad?" He just looked at me without saying anything and went to his room. I looked at his cell phone, and it was around 2 a.m. I thought he had arrived early and went back to sleep. The next morning I asked him, "What were you doing in your room last night?" He looked at me strangely and said, "Your room?" I replied, "Yes, around 2 a.m. You're early, right?" He just laughed, answering me, "Yesterday I arrived at almost 4 a.m. and went straight to the shower and then slept. I didn't go to your room." At the time I was scared and afraid to sleep with the door open for a long time. Unknown entity encounter and trouble. I'm not sure how to begin this. Whatever this is, it didn't just affect me but my family in different ways, and it continued to mess with me for years after we moved from the house where it all started. I'm trying to condense a complex experience that spans several years into key details that seem important, and I apologize if it comes across as strange or awkward. My grandmother was supposed to have traced her side of the family back to an unregistered group of natives who escaped the Trail of Tears, and after I shared this unusual secret with someone, they suggested it might be a skinwalker, but I remain uncertain. I am aware that the house where the haunting began was rife with family conflict, which manifested in various ways. A spirit there would often scare me by calling my name, slamming doors, giving me strange nightmares, and even mimicking the voices of family members to other members. The first time I can think of it appearing is when we were coming back from a road trip at night. Dad was driving, and he hit the brakes hard and swerved because he'd seen a wolf with no eyes step out into our lane and look at our oncoming car. Because everyone else was asleep, he was the only one to see it, and there was nobody around to suggest that anything had physically been there. The second time I think it showed itself was many years after we had long moved from the house where this all started. I was home alone at night messaging a friend, and I saw a huge figure walking up the road. I froze in fear as the figure approached and eventually passed by the house where we were living. I remember it had a strange skull resembling that of a vervet monkey as its head, while the rest of its body was completely hidden behind a cloak made of dark-colored fur. It hasn't been around for a bit now, but while it was around or possibly pursuing me, it had caused a lot of hardship for me and my family. I remember that if I talked or thought about it too much, it would draw its attention back to me when it seemed like it had left, and I would have let my guard down. Whatever it was, it always made me feel terrified and unsafe. I used to use symbols of protection from any religion I could think of. I'm not sure what this entity is, but this is not a story I share much, as I know how it sounds, and I don't want to go through the normal ridicule and dismissive comments. The truest paranormal story I have ever been told. This story didn't happen to me but to my dance teacher. She told me and my classmates this story one night during one of our classes. I will call her Jenna, her husband, Matt, and Matt's little sister, Kayla. All people are important in this story, and all experienced paranormal activity. Jenna is a God-fearing Christian that did not believe in any type of spirits beforehand, and she would not make up this story to scare high school girls during a class time that we were paying for her to teach. She was obviously very shaken and decided to tell us her story. So here goes. The beginnings. Jenna and Matt had just gotten married. They were in their early 20s and had just bought into a year-long lease at this cute, little, old white house minutes away from Matt's parents. Since being newlyweds, they still had a ton of moving boxes located in their bedroom, and overall it was kind of a mess. When things started happening to them, it was very small. Now, despite the disorganized post-wedding boxes, Jenna is a complete clean freak. So when her makeup seemed to be scattered everywhere in the bathroom and the toothpaste would go missing and show up in random places like under their bed, she would immediately blame Matt for what happened. Blaming the husband for anything little like the wedding boxes being messed up, her makeup suddenly getting thrown around in the bathroom, or clothes being pulled out of drawers, she would go to Matt and be like, "Honey, why have you been doing underscore?" And he would be like, I didn't touch anything, Jenna. Calm down." She accused him about 20 times of doing things to mess with her. Jenna swore that it was Matt, and she told us she honestly was questioning her marriage at this time. Jokes. It wasn't until one night that even the possibility of ghosts or someone living under the house crossed Jenna's mind. That one night, Jenna and Matt both worked 9-to-5 jobs, so when they came home after work, they usually would just have a chill night in, adjusting to the life of being newlyweds. After dinner, Matt would basically just go sit and watch TV in the living room while Jenna did the dishes in the kitchen. During their post-dinner routine, Jenna called out of the kitchen, "Matt, do you have any dishes in there that need to be cleaned? I want to get all of them done." And he called back from his recliner, "Nope." So Jenna laid all the wet dishes onto the countertop to dry, away from the sink, and cleaned out the sink for the night. She then proceeded to walk into the bedroom for a quick second to check on their two small dogs sleeping on the floor and then walked back into the kitchen. Jenna became furious when she saw one single glass sitting in the sink. She ran into the living room and screamed at her husband, "Matt, I told you if you had any more glasses to give them to me." He then replied, "Jenna, you saw me, I haven't left my recliner." It was true, it would have been impossible for him to get up and get back into the recliner without her seeing him. She said, "Well, there's a glass in the sink, and I didn't put it there." Matt suddenly laughed and joked, maybe we have a ghost. Jenna became terrified, not at the thought of having a ghost, but maybe something more realistic, like someone living under their house. The next morning she called the sheriff and had them check under the house. No one was there or had been there ever. Kayla's story. Kayla, Matt's 17-year-old sister, decided to spend the night on Jenna and Matt's couch one night when her parents went out of town for an anniversary trip. This was around 2 months of Jenna and Matt living in this house, and they obviously had suspicions about something not being right, but they didn't tell a soul about what was going on, because they thought they would sound crazy. Kayla had no idea about the strange activity going on in the house. So when Jenna woke up at 5 in the morning after Kayla spent the night, she panicked when she did not see Kayla on the couch. She woke up Matt, and they both were freaking out because they hadn't heard anything from her, and her car was missing in the driveway. They decided to drive minutes down the road to Matt's parents' house, and sure enough, they found Kayla asleep in her car. Kayla woke up, and her first response was, "I am never staying at your house again." She told them of how she woke up to the smell of smoke in the house but didn't see or smell the smoke outside of her position on the couch. She decided to ignore it, but as soon as she tried to go back to sleep, she started hearing heavy knocking sounds coming from under the couch that only occurred when she placed her head down on the pillow. As soon as her head would come off the pillow, the knocking would stop. Now, this freaked her out a great deal, but what made her run was when she saw Jenna's 2 small dogs sitting in the living room, facing her, and not making a sound. No barking, just staring. She tried to call them to her, but they wouldn't budge. She then ran outside, too scared to stay another second, and drove to her house to sleep in her car. At this point, Jenna and Matt knew they had to get out before things became worse. The day that they decided to leave, Jenna was still at work, but Matt came home early one afternoon. As Matt was walking into the kitchen, he really didn't notice anything off. It was just another day of coming home. He went into the bedroom to use the bathroom and check on the dogs, but then he heard a huge crash come from the kitchen. He ran into the kitchen to find all the drawers and everything inside the drawers had been flung open and scattered onto the floor. Pots, utensils, bowls, plates, everything you can imagine. He then called Jenna and said these fateful words. "Do not come home, I have the dogs. We are not coming back to this place. Go to my parents, the landlady." Now, Jenna realized that since she signed a year-long lease, there was no way that she could just get out of it. But she also knew there was no way she or Matt was going back there. So she called the landlady and said, "Hey, is there any way we can get out of this lease?" And to Jenna's shock, she replied, "Yeah, no problem. Can I ask the reason you are leaving?" And Jenna replied, "Have you ever been told this house is haunted?" There was a long pause by the landlady, and she sighed and said, "Yes, almost all previous owners complain of something like that. You are not the first to get out of your lease early." Jenna became furious. "Don't you have to disclose that in selling the house?" The lady replied, "We only have to say if someone was ended in the house. To our knowledge, nothing of that extreme nature has happened." The end. To this day, Jenna tries to avoid driving past that little, seemingly innocent, house, but when she does drive by, she never sees the same set of cars there twice. My stepdad's experiences with ghosts and the supernatural. It seems his entire family is very spiritual. According to what I have heard, he once recounted an incident in which his grandfather resorted to using a belt because his mother and aunts/uncles were disturbing the spirits by using a Ouija board. Most of his stories come from the house he lived in with his ex and my stepsisters when they were young. The more mundane encounters he had were toys that made a sound when they moved and would randomly go off in the middle of the night. A common occurrence was sightings of Granddad Charlie, my stepdad's stepdad. I'm unsure if it's the same man I mentioned in the beginning. The first time he appeared, one of my stepsisters was going to bed, I believe, and she came downstairs saying she saw Granddad Charlie in the doorway. My stepdad assured her that he wouldn't cause any harm. They just kind of lived with a dead guy after that. Stepsis would say that Granddad Charlie would stand in her room and say he loved her, and she would blow him a kiss. A while later, my stepdad had his encounter with Charlie. He was lying down in bed when suddenly he couldn't move and felt like someone was walking through him. According to him, he just told Charlie to piss off. I think the only reason our house isn't haunted is because my mom is superstitious and big on crystals and evil eyes. When I got big into witchcraft around Christmas, she even refused to let me do anything with curses when I joked about it. The major paranormal/supernatural experiences in my life, thus far. I grew up with a Christian mother, who was very devout and eventually became a prayer counselor at the Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN. My father was, for the most part, an atheist. We would go to church while he stayed home. That kind of thing. He was fairly angry, pretty much around the clock. She was a stay-at-home mother for most of my childhood and was generally very passive and happy around us kids. I myself am a believer in Christ but don't really call myself a Christian. There's a lot about the church that I just don't agree with, which I won't get into here. I just wanted to give some context. When I was 3 years old, 1977, my brother was almost 2, and my sister was about 8 or 9 months old. I remember quite clearly having an invisible friend that I played with. One evening my mother called me into the kitchen as she was cooking dinner. She asked how my day was going and if I was having fun. She then explained that my brother was old enough to play with and that maybe I should play with him more. And my friend a little bit less. I remember thinking, oh. Like it had just dawned on me, and she was totally right. So I turned to George, my invisible friend, and told him, I'm sorry, you have to go now. I'm going to play with brother from now on. I opened the back door, which was located right in the kitchen. The screen door opened on its own, and my friend left. I don't remember anything about how George looked. I don't think I ever actually saw him. But we certainly played a lot. And I'm pretty sure something was listening when I talked to him. It was just something I knew wholeheartedly. My mother either didn't notice the screen door had opened on its own or never admitted it. Admittedly, it could have been my imagination, but I do remember it very clearly. I can still see the small rips in the screen in my mind, from our dog's claws. When I was 4.5, early 1979, my parents were separated. They later reunited after my brother's stint in the hospital later that year. During that time, though, we lived with my mother in a small townhouse. One night she was outside hanging up the wash to dry. She came back inside terrified a few short moments later and ran straight for her Bible. She immediately started reading Psalms and praying. When I asked her what had happened, she explained that she'd seen a shadowy being that seemed to absorb the light around it. It had moved right past her, almost touching her, through the shadows and off around a corner. She spun around a bit, checking for someone to be there, but found nobody. She then ran her right arm through the same shadow, and her arm's shadow blended with the one on the ground. That's when she'd freaked out and ran inside. Years later, at around age 10, I was in 5th grade, 1984. We spent the afternoons at our mother's family's house with our young uncles after school. The youngest was 3 years older than I was. We had moved across town and were using my grandmother's address for school zoning to stay in the same schools for the remainder of the school year. There was a lot of horsing around, playing with G.I. Joe and Transformer toys, and so on. For the most part, we tried to stay outside when we played. Both to appease my grandmother and because of something that had happened very early during this period. It was a dreary day, and we didn't want to be outside. They didn't have cable, so there wasn't much to watch on TV. And here we are sitting around with 5 boys, me, my brother, and 3 uncles, and a girl, my sister, all school age and basically bored shitless. My grandmother was in the kitchen, a few feet from the living room. So we were trying to stay as quiet as kids between 7 and 18 can stay when trapped in the same room. We were talking about school, drawing things, talking about music, etc. The room had 4 doorways. One leads to the aforementioned kitchen via an open hallway entrance that leads to the other rooms and a bathroom. Another, to the master bedroom. The third was the front door, and the fourth was basically a closet that wasn't used. In fact, a small bookcase was in front of it, blocking it from opening. As we sat there chatting, we all, and I mean LL, heard that closet door close and footsteps ascend the stairs inside up to the attic. To make it a bit freakier for my siblings and me, we had no clue the closet even had stairs. It was a very thin set of stairs, not designed for normal use. The attic was small and had very little standing space. It was absolutely packed with boxes and general clutter. Yet we had all just heard not only someone ascend the stairs but also mill around in the attic for a few minutes. My oldest uncle moved the bookcase and checked. Nobody was on the stairs. Nobody had opened the door. And the dust in the attic, all over the little floor space that was open, hadn't been disturbed. My grandmother was still in the kitchen, cooking. When I was 13, 1987, we were driving home from a family outing. We passed a home around the corner from ours, and it was surrounded by police cars on the road and up in the front yard. A man, not in uniform, was talking through a megaphone at the house. A cop ushered us past the home, sending us down the street. One end of the house was darkened, not lit up by the police flashlights and headlights. It was still clearly visible, just not awash in light. A pair of red, wide, pointed eyes stared at us as we drove past. They glowed from inside the window at the edge of the front of the house. It was a normal-sized window, and the eyes were just above the ledge, centered in the window. They spanned approximately half of the width of the window, and the head they were attached to, which was nothing but a dark, formless head from my viewpoint, turned so that the eyes could follow us as we drove by. When we got home, my mother raced in and turned on the local news. It was some kind of standoff with the police following a husband hurting or threatening his wife. I never found out which. I explained the eyes I'd seen to her. She declared it had to have been a demon and suggested the man might have either attracted it with his behavior or been driven mad by it. The guy had apparently gone batshit crazy that night. The rumor was he was perfectly sane when the cops took him in. When I was 16, 1990, I was in a small garage band. We attempted Metallica covers, The Cure, Anthrax, and stuff like that. I routinely snuck out of the house on weekend nights to hang out with the guys and do stupid stuff. One such night I was at one of their houses. His bedroom window led out onto the roof of the second story, so we often went out there. On that night we were out there smoking and bullshitting. Suddenly we both noticed, almost simultaneously, 6 dense, smoky, shadowy forms below us at ground level. They were scattered around in and around the street and the yard beyond. As we sat there frozen, jaws agape, several of them turned to face us. There were no defining features. They were black as black could be. After a few moments they left. All at varying speeds. A few months later, at that same friend's house, I was ascending the stairs after grabbing a drink from his kitchen. We were fooling around, reading the Necronomicon for kicks and writing song lyrics. On my way up the stairs it felt like someone bumped into my right side, which was facing a wall. I turned to look and saw a translucent man dressed in what I could only describe as Civil War period dress. He then faded away into nothing. I went upstairs and told my friend about it. He then explained a few things about his house and his family. The house had been part of the Underground Railroad, moving escaped slaves. There were tunnels in the walls and a sprawling basement that had false walls. And he joked that several people were probably buried in wall spaces that hadn't been found yet. He then admitted that his uncle was a leading member of the Aryan Brotherhood and his grandfather a Grand Master in the KKK. Well, the latter reasons kind of encouraged me to disassociate myself from him. But there was a tinge of regret mixed in, because I wanted to spend more time at his house exploring these phenomena. It never happened, though, for what should be obvious reasons. When I was 17, early 1992, I was experimenting with lucid dreaming, meditation, and trying to have an OBE. Never really got the OBE to happen, but I did accomplish some very intense lucid dreaming. I actually dreamed of a woman during one of those sessions, and I became obsessed with finding her. Absolutely beautiful and intensely alluring. Later that year when I graduated high school, I'd gotten over the idea and had almost forgotten about it until many years later. When I later met the woman that would become my wife, we're currently married, in 1997, one of my first thoughts was, holy shit, it's her. I can't be certain it is her or that it's real, but I was absolutely convinced I'd met the same woman I'd seen in my lucid dreaming session. Oddly enough, if that were the case, I would have had to have been seeing the future. Because she's several years younger than I am. So, I personally have my doubts. But the dream and then the later OMG moment were so striking, I felt they were worth mentioning. When I was 18, I was in my first year in the USAF, 1993. I was living in the dorms. The rooms were split 2 to a room, with a bathroom in the middle. My roommates and I had combined our beds on the quiet side of the dorm building and turned the other room into a party room. And holy crap did we party. That fact, plus odd shift work, leads to some fairly odd sleeping hours. Well, one afternoon I was lying down to get some sleep. I'd partied for 2 days straight. The party was finally over. I hadn't had a drink in at least 12 hours, as I had spent the last almost 9 helping to clean the courtyard and several rooms between the 2 dorm buildings at our party's conclusion. You have no idea how bad the mess was. I am one of those people that can lie down and be asleep in seconds. I very rarely take more than a minute or 2 to fall asleep. When I do, it usually turns into full-blown insomnia, and I'm up for a few days whether I like it or not. But mostly I black out in seconds. On this particular occasion I was exhausted beyond reason and expected to fall asleep instantly. It almost worked. As I was passing out, in that mode where you sometimes sleep twitch an arm or a leg for no reason, something happened. I felt like I was being pulled down into an endless chasm. Like when someone tugs on the back of your shirt, with the shirt putting pressure on your shoulders, chest, and stomach as you move backward. Only I was lying on my back with no shirt on, no sheets over me, and pretty much just wearing shorts. And it was a hard, fast pull. I had the simultaneous sensation of falling very quickly. The rise in your stomach, the loss of contact with the surface beneath you, the feeling that you're in mid-air. All of it hit me like a wall. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't open my eyes. I could see something though. It was as if I could see my body, moving upwards and away from me at a blinding speed. and a deep chill washed over me. I panicked. Hard. I thought to myself, "Save me, Jesus," just about as loudly as I could think. In an instant, it was over. I sat up extremely fast, almost knocking myself out on the bunk above me. I was gasping for air and covered in sweat. It was a cold room, so I had no reason to be sweating. I looked at the clock. I had lain down at 3:45 p.m. It was 3:45 p.m. I got up, paced the room for a bit still feeling panicked, and eventually just put a shirt on and went and slept on a couch in the day room. I haven't had many experiences since that time. I've had some vague, strange occurrences. I've had unexplainable uneasiness in certain places. But nothing like the events outlined above. Those events definitely made me a believer in the paranormal/supernatural. However, I have a few theories about the spirit world and what's actually going on. But they're just theories. And I'll reserve them for now. To be clear, I don't frighten easily. In fact, not all of these things terrified or frightened me, or at least they didn't for very long. I had recurring nightmares between the ages of 3 and 6, they changed over time. 4 to 6 was the worst. My mother taught me to try to turn my bad dreams into stories. I wrote a lot of poorly written short stories as a kid, as a result. It conditioned my mind to be inquisitive about these kinds of things, find interest in them, and try to explore them rather than be frightened by them. I'd like to add that this kind of sharing isn't normal for me. In fact, this is the first time I've mentioned many of these experiences anywhere to anyone. I was raised/conditioned not to share things that could make me look weak/crazy/etc. But I've been lurking here for a while now. I've seen others share, and it has inspired me to share. Thanks for taking the time to listen to this. My family home in the UK is old and has many accounts of supernatural experiences. My family home is called the Jolly Anglers. We moved in when I was 1 year old in 1978. Some parts of the house date back to medieval times when it served as a wayside hovel, and it still retains the original inglenook fireplaces. It was a public house/guest house for many years before we moved in. The earliest record of it that I've managed to find is in the 1841 census, when William Rivet is the innkeeper. It was acquired by Stewart and Pattison from Ferrier and Company in 1884 and was still an S&P brewery pub when it served its final pint in 1952. At some point between 1901 and 1911, the Angel changed its name to the Jolly Anglers, possibly coinciding with a change in landlord. We think of the poet Jessie Pope, who moved to Fritton Village after her marriage in 1929. Maybe referenced it in her collection of verses entitled Three Jolly Anglers, published in 1913. In the 1900s, the owners also added a tea room. Over the years, my mom could have and should have written a book about the paranormal events that many of us experienced at the house, which has also been visited by 3 different paranormal investigation teams. Dad built an indoor pool in 1988 and found many seashells deep down when it used to be linked to the sea. And it had a small jetty, and boats used to moor up to visit it. It's now in the middle of the countryside, and over the years water has receded over a mile away in distance, but many years ago the sea linked to the lake nearby, and in pre-medieval times it was largely dug then to extract peat for burning. The village where the house resides seems to have been known to our Roman heritage for being in a small hillock lying about half a mile north of the lake near our house. People are always interested in the paranormal aspects of my parents' house, which originally served as a medieval wayside hovel before becoming an inn and a pub in Norfolk, UK. So I've written some of the strange things that have happened in my parents' house, the Jolly Anglers. Where do I start? We moved into the house in 1978, and in the first 6 months Mom was in tears and wanted to leave again, as she was scared to death of all the strange happenings. Dad was working offshore, and they had spent all their money on the old house, so they knew they couldn't just leave. Dad was not one to easily concede, but he was also not the one experiencing the situation on a daily basis. Half the time it was just Mom, me as a 9-month-old, and my older siblings, 15 and 17. Now they say teenage energy can cause spirits to be active in houses, and it attracts them, so maybe that could have been why they all saw a lot when I was a baby in the house. One night Mom was in bed, and I was in the cot in the same room when she woke up and heard rustling coming from the staircase, which is open and goes straight into their bedroom. She then, in the dim light, saw a black shadow floating up the stairs and moving very slowly toward her cot. Mum was in shock and couldn't move for a while as she watched the shadow float across the room. When the figure leaned into my cot, she was petrified and turned on the side light in panic, causing the shadow to disappear. She said the noise sounded like crinoline dresses, like how the material rustled as someone walked along, maybe in the Victorian era. Another time, my parents also, while in bed, heard an old honky-tonk type piano play downstairs, cigar smoke, and voices several times in the first 6 months of living there. Note, they had no piano, nor did they smoke. Dad always went down to investigate with his double-barrel shotgun, but everything went silent whenever he opened the door at the bottom of the stairs. They lived with daily bangs, strange voices, knocking, and footsteps all through their lives, and also others, myself and my siblings, have heard these also on a regular basis. My brother and a friend of his, who were in the lounge one evening, saw the start of what looked like a red woman's dress coming down one set of stairs in the old area, which was originally the pub. The pub area is my parents' best lounge and was once 2 rooms, but Dad knocked them both into one big one. When it was a pub, one was a smoking room and the other was the bar room, which still has a bar in it but not the original one. My father purchased it from an old retired landlord of a demolished pub in Great Yarmouth. This room has a staircase at each end. One staircase goes into my parents' bedroom, the other staircase at the opposite end goes up into a small hall, and off that are 2 bedrooms, one of which was my brother's. And the other was my sister, but I slept in there with her frequently. My parents built a small bedroom downstairs, which was a section of the larger bathroom, which decades before was called the parlor room, not the bedroom. We do know from history records that one of the landlord's children, many years ago, died in the house of tuberculosis, a young girl about 8 years old. My auntie used to sleep in my old small bedroom when she visited us, and one evening she was petrified when she saw what looked like flickering candles moving under the doorframe. On another occasion, she heard breathing that sounded raspy and a female crying. She ended up sleeping in my brother's room and refused to stay in my little bedroom after the 2 events. Pins in the kitchen have flown out of cupboards and dented the radiator, pictures have flown off walls, and ornaments also have somehow landed on the other ends of rooms, not just dropped downwards. Small dancing white lights. It has been witnessed by several people in different areas of the house and also seen by the paranormal research team. All teams have picked up things and seen things and even been poked by an entity. Psychic mediums have come to the house and said there are many spirits, including a woman who had several children and drowned herself and one young man with a clubfoot who lived at the pub and in those days would have been called an imbecile who owned a black dog, which haunts the house too. My mom later investigated documents for this claim, and she saw on the 1899 census that, in fact, a man classed as an imbecile was residing at the residence. When I was about 3 years old, my parents told me I had an invisible friend who was a lady in a red dress. I said she used to push me on the swing outside, and I would talk to her while she played with me and my toys. I said she was a nice lady that liked children. Years later, a neighbor from the village was at one of our parties and was talking about the history of her family. The neighbor had lived in our village for many years, and during her family research, she discovered that her great-great-grandmother had been pulled out of the lake near our house. She apparently had drowned herself because twins were prevalent in her family. She had had 2 sets and was pregnant again, and her husband had recently died. And she couldn't take it anymore. She was very poor, and when they took the body from the river, they didn't have funeral homes in those days in villages, so they always laid the bodies out in a cold place, which was normally the local pub cellar, where, in fact, she was laid out to be buried in our pub cellar, and they held the post-mortem there too, which she had documents of. Which, funny enough, was my playroom as a child and freezer storage area. Now no one knows if she died wearing a red dress, but it was sensed that she loved children by the psychic, so everyone thinks that that is the lady in the red dress that was my invisible friend as a child. There was an incident once where a family friend's child was over with his mom, and as 3-year-olds do, they open doors and investigate. Unfortunately, he opened the cellar door and fell to the bottom. Now there are big concrete steps to the bottom of the cellar. My father saw him enter the cellar, but didn't see him fall, but when he rushed to him, he was standing at the bottom of the steps, not even crying. They all checked him over and said, "Are you okay?" And he said, "The lady got me," and pointed to an area in the cellar, apparently giving everyone their goosebumps. At another party, a non-believer jokingly dismissed ghosts and the experiences of others, telling a group, "It's a load of old nonsense." The moment he said that, the old heavy wooden front door creaked open, and no one was there behind it. Apparently, he went very pale and flustered. Many people witnessed that. Also, people have seen figures in the corner of their eye or movement for years, and we all got used to the footsteps, taps, and bumps, as it is an old house and has had a lot of people walk through it. It ended up just being a thing you got used to, and Mum didn't leave after 6 months. Dad convinced her to stick it out, and things did calm down but never completely stopped. When my grandmother died, my father saw her sitting on the end of the bed looking at her daughter. When I was very ill as a child in bed, I saw a man in a black suit, which I thought was the doctor, and I started talking to him, asking where my mom was, and he disappeared. One of my nieces has seen a lady sitting in an old velvet chair in one of the bedrooms. My other grandmother, when she stayed over once, heard what sounded like rings being dropped into the sink, as all bedrooms have a sink in them, as it used to be a guest house. As a teenager I moved from my sister's old room into my brother's old room at the back of the house, and one night I woke to see a very tall man in a black cape. In the village, we have no streetlights, and I never shut my curtains because we are not overlooked. Therefore, the moonlight came through my window, illuminating a very tall man in a black cape who must have been 6'5", as his head nearly reached the ceiling. I could see in the light that he had fair hair slicked back and parted at the side, but he didn't move. It was like a picture in a picture book. I couldn't help but be quite mesmerized for a few seconds by how clear it was, but I lost that feeling and suddenly jumped up and ran out of that room. I didn't even bother putting a light on. I woke my parents up, and I burst into tears. That really shook me up. After that event I even changed the layout of my room so I wouldn't wake up in that position again. Another time I woke up, and I heard loud footsteps going around the bed, but strangely, the footsteps were like heavy boots, and they were at my ear level, not on the ground. To this day, I still find that very strange, and they sounded amplified, too. Another time a man with scraggly long hair poked his head out from one of the sloped ceilings in my room, too. Each time I'd shoot out of the room and sleep in the other bedroom for a few days, before I felt safe to go back in and sleep. Me and my husband and our 2-year-old daughter left at 4 in the morning once after a family wedding because my daughter was crying. My husband picked her up out of the cot bed, and she pointed to a corner near the stairs and said, "Man there. She has autism," and her speech was delayed at that age, but she was physically scared of something that night. She did not settle there, which was very unusual for her. It scared my husband, so he said, "We are going home now." When we got to our own home, she slept peacefully. I believe a spirit was being a nuisance to her. One of Mom's best friends was spiritual and told me that I had a gift and that I saw spirits. It's something I never wanted, and it scared me every time. Even in my own house, grown with a daughter and husband of my own, I still see people, as I call them, in my own home at night, and every time I see them, I always think it's an intruder before ever thinking it's a spirit, lol. And I always fight, not flight. I run at them to attack and always end up running into my bedroom door, lol. My dad has been dead 15 years, and when he died at home in bed, and the house was very active again for a while, but my father built a lot of the new part of the house with his own hands, so we all knew he would have a lot of energy there when he passed. Mum is now on her own at the house, and she will be 80 in 2022. She now has limited mobility, but she is very stubborn and has no intention of leaving. It's far too big for her to cope with, but she has a gardener and cleaner, and I help her a lot with shopping. She says when she leaves this house, it will be in a coffin. My daughter is 11, and she stays with her nanny every Friday night. It's her routine, and my mom loves having her. During the summer and school holidays, she stays a few days a week and loves the house. However, I believe she is also spiritual and can sense things. Despite this, it doesn't bother her to sleep alone in my sister's old room, which is next to my mom's. Until about a year ago, she told my mother that she had seen her granddad in her mother's room, where she slept on occasions, and he asked her questions like, "What does she like to do?" After that, she now sleeps downstairs, which is now where mother also sleeps due to her mobility. Well, those are some of the stories anyway. There are many more, but these are the ones I can remember off the top of my head. Other experiences. A friend saw a bearded gentleman's faced reflection as she passed by a mirror. Mum briefly saw a grotesque male face in gray, resembling what Satan might look like, in her own reflection while passing by a mirror in the bedroom hallway. I heard my music box drawer click open, and the music started playing when I was trying to go to sleep one night as a child. I removed it from my room after that. My mother had also heard that sound on several occasions. I had china dolls in my room when I was a young teen, and once one of their arms flopped down, I got my dad to remove them, and now they are still in their hallway on a shelf. One night Mum felt really hot while trying to sleep. She felt the heating was on too high, so she went to turn it off. The thermostat was located in the lounge downstairs, so she adjusted the heating. As she went to the thermostat, she suddenly saw the door to the lounge opening. All were asleep upstairs. She said that she ran up the stairs so quickly that the top of her nightgown tore. She was shouting as she ran upstairs to my sister, urging her to help grab me from the cot and take me into my brother's bedroom. They then barricaded the door with his wardrobe and didn't sleep at all that night until morning when they all investigated together, apparently. My brother complained and said, "It's roasting hot up here, Mum." She replied, "You will have to bloody sweat, as I'm not going down till morning." Going up to bed one night, she was turning all the lights off in the lounge. She had a gold latch she used to flip down to secure the door in the lounge to the rest of the house. One night after she had done that, as she walked to the stairs, she suddenly heard the latch flick up and the door slowly open. She scampered up the stairs, locked the door behind her, and put covers over her face. All the bedrooms have either key locks or bolts on the inside of every bedroom door due to travelers. Visiting the pub years ago, they could rent a room for the night if they wanted as guests. Mum very much appreciated the locks and bolts, as she did think it was mostly intruders to start with. It's funny when you look back on it all and you think to yourself, spirits can get through locked doors and bolted doors. But at the time, it made you feel really safe and secure that they would stay behind a locked door, and, strangely enough, usually, they did. Many times Dad was armed with his shotgun, quietly sneaking around the house after hearing bangs, bumps, and knocks. It's a big house with many steps, levels, twists, and turns, so it could take him a while to do a sweep search of the house. Mum said she was always so relieved when he came back up to bed and said, "No one's broken in," but then both were equally perplexed on what the noise was that they heard in the first place. Paranormal investigators, along with Mum and her teenage grandson, witnessed all the glasses in the bar, which are stored upside down, start to clink together several times. Years later, they went from a latch lock to in the lounge area, there is a battery-operated alarm door lock, so if it's switched on and the door opens, an alarm sounds. Which she set religiously. In the middle of the night, she heard the smoke alarm going off. When she went down half asleep and groggy to investigate, she couldn't smell any smoke, so she got a stool and checked the smoke alarm, and in her groggy, sleepy state, she suddenly realized the noise was coming from the door, which had been opened. She hastily shut the door and used the old bolt and ran upstairs. Mum was tidying behind the bar one morning after a family party we had the night before when she felt something or someone grab her shoulder. There was no one there. There is a small American Indian doll high up on the bar, it is still there, and one day my parents noticed I was playing with it as a toddler. They say there was no way possible that I would have been able to get that myself. They said, "How did you get that down from there?" I apparently said, "The lady gave it to me." So many to recall, but these are some throughout the 46 years of my life. Added. Many lights started to flicker for over a month after his death, touch lamps especially. Also, the solar lights outside the back door used to go on and off, and we sat and watched them several times and spoke to Dad, sure that he was trying to communicate with us. Many lights started to flicker for over a month after his death. Also, the solar lights outside the back door used to go in and out, we sat and watched them several times and spoke to Dad. Something terrorized us on our Arizona desert farm. I was 16 when this all happened. We lived in the Arizona desert back when we still lived on the farm. Yet, I still wonder what the hell we experienced all those years ago. It started subtly, like most things out here in the quiet hum of the Arizona desert. You live out here long enough, and you get used to the strange sounds, the coyote's evening chorus, the distant rumble of a passing train, and the wind carrying dust devils across the mesa. We raised goats and grew some tough, drought-resistant crops. The nearest town was a good hour's drive, which suited us just fine. The first sign was the dogs. We had 3 working dogs, loyal and fierce. Usually, they were a symphony of barks at anything that moved too close to the property line, javelinas, bobcats, and even the occasional lost hiker. But a few nights back, they went from their usual boisterous alerts to a low, guttural whine that felt different. It wasn't anger or aggression, it was pure, unadulterated fear. They huddled by the back door, tails tucked, ears flat, staring out into the moonless blackness of the desert beyond our fence line. Their hackles weren't raised, they were just frozen. I've seen those dogs face down rattlesnakes and mountain lions without a flinch. This was different. "What is it, guys?" I murmured as my older brother and I went to check on the goats in their pens to see if the fences were still intact. "Everything all right?" my brother asked, shining a flashlight from ahead of me, standing already at the fence. "Dogs are riled up," I said, simply looking around. "Could be coyotes. We've had problems with them for a few days now," he replied. I shone my heavy-duty flashlight out. Nothing. Just the endless, thorny expanse of creosote and saguaro cacti. The air was still, too still. Even the crickets seemed to quiet down. The next morning, my brother and I found tracks. Not coyote, not dog. They were vaguely canine, but too large, and there was something off about the gait. In some areas, they appeared almost bipedal, as if whatever created them occasionally walked on 2 legs. They led right up to the perimeter fence, paused, and then veered sharply away into the brush, disappearing. We thought they would have belonged to wolves, but they were quite rare in these parts. Heck, seeing one was a miracle. We showed our dad the tracks, and he told us not to inform our mother so she wouldn't have to worry, as she had been dealing with hypertension for some time. His face, though, confirmed the fact that they couldn't be wolves. Our dogs have encountered wolves before, but they did not react in the same way as they did the previous night. That afternoon, we heard it while my brother and I were helping our dad fix a broken irrigation valve near the back 40. A sound that couldn't make sense. It was our mother's voice. "Honey? Boys? Are you out here?" "Yeah, Mom. We're here," my brother replied, standing still and pausing to listen. "Okay," the voice replied, closer than it should have been, almost right behind the line of tall salt cedar bushes 20 feet from us. My dad walked over to the bushes. "What do you need, baby?" Silence. He pushed the dry branches aside. Nothing. Just the dirt, the humming heat, and the slow drip of water from the leaking valve. Dad looked at us before pointing at me, who had my phone on me. "Call your mother." I quickly pulled out my phone with shaking hands and dialed her up, waiting for her to pick up. "Yes, honey? You need something?" Mom said, her voice clear and a bit annoyed. A cold tremor ran down my spine. We thought you called us. Just now. Out by the back field." "No," she said firmly. "I haven't left the kitchen all morning. You must have misheard the wind." I ended the call before looking at my brother and dad, who waited with expectant eyes. "She said she was in the kitchen all morning. Never left the house," I said with a shaky voice. "How's that possible?" "We just heard her," my brother said. "Let's just pack up," my dad chimed in. He looked calm, but I knew he was freaked out too. "I think we're done for the day." I tried to shake it off, blaming the heat. But I know my mom's voice. And the thing that terrified me was that the voice I heard, though an accurate mimicry, lacked the little, familiar cracks and hums that usually characterize her voice when she's talking outdoors. It was too perfect. It sounded like a recording played back without any static. As the days went on, a day came when one of the sturdiest yearling bucks, a black one named Samson, was missing. My brother and I volunteered to go look for the buck, giving our dad the free time he needed to finish up the valve. Though, he let us take his rifle as a precaution because he didn't want us defenseless out there. We followed the paths that were grooved into the hard ground as rock crunched beneath our boots as we walked. It was quite hot by 11 a.m., with the cicadas going crazy and the heat of the sun blazing down on us. After we trekked down the path for a good 30 minutes, I started to slow down at some point and realized something was off. I couldn't see it, but I could feel eyes on us. I turned to look around, but there was nothing. Just the silent breeze was sifting through the bushes. Even the cicadas started to quiet down, which is unusual. "Keep up," my older brother said, way ahead of me. He was turned toward me, watching me as I sped up. "Sorry." We walked for a few more minutes before we started to hear the buzz of flies to our left. Off the trail, we stopped and listened. "You hear that?" he asked, glancing at me. "Yeah. Flies." We got off the trail and rounded a large rock. What we saw still shakes me to my core. It was Samson, our goat buck, and he lay on the ground on his side. We knew he was dead because he was disemboweled and all his things were outside. "My God," he said. "What the F does this do?" I asked in a heavy voice. "Homeless hitchhiker, maybe. But I didn't see anyone," he said. I could see his eyes moving rapidly, trying to rationalize what he was seeing. Trying to find an explanation, any explanation. The yips and cries of coyotes interrupted our thoughts. We looked around but couldn't see anything. They sounded distant at first, but then they started to come closer. "That's our cue to leave. We need to get away from this body now," my brother yelled as he grabbed me and ran. We sprinted down the trail, but a circle of sounds ensnared us. The cries of the coyotes sounded like they were coming from everywhere and surrounding us, like they were trying to disorient us. "Don't stop," my brother yelled as I kept up with him as I ran for my life. We ran past two rock-like boulders on either side of the trail, and then I decided to turn and look back. A figure jumped onto one of the rocks and stood in a crouched position. Its head was locked toward us, and I knew it was watching us as we ran. The figure was wearing a fur pelt on its back, which had eyes and ears resembling those of an animal. The figure had long black hair that I could see under the pelt that it had on, and it looked to be female from what I could see. Her fingers were gray from what I could tell was maybe ash or something. There was also a feather attached to one of her forearms. I saw its mouth move, and the sounds that it made were horrific, sounds that no normal human could produce. The disorienting coyote sounds we heard were coming from her, and they were still deafening. To my horror, she jumped off the rock and started to move. It moved like something that has never properly learned how to use joints, transitioning from standing to a quadrupedal run in one sickening, fluid motion. It was dark, a smudge against the dying light. But then, it got up and started to full sprint at us, and I screamed in terror as I saw this thing, pretending to be a woman, start to close the gap on us quickly at a speed that was impossible. My brother reacted on instinct and yelled before firing the rifle. The thing jumped over us and ran ahead into the nearby bushes before turning to shriek at us with that horrible sound from earlier. It then took off into the bushes without rustling even one bush's straw. I hit it. Holy cow, I hit it. My brother exclaimed in relief and panic. I snapped out of my thoughts and saw him pointing at the ground. I looked down and saw blood on the ground before it traveled along the ground in the direction of where the thing disappeared. The blood was strange, it looked red from one angle, but it looked black from another, and it scared me even more. Let's go. Let's go. My brother said, roughly pulling me. We got home eventually and told our parents everything that happened. Our mom got up and left the kitchen after we were done explaining, and our dad merely sighed and sat quietly. They never responded to our explanations. Only months following that event, we moved away from the farm and sold the goats. We never got back there ever since, and our parents urged us to never talk about it ever again. But sometimes I still can't help but wonder what the hell that thing was.